Six-pack Lapadat. I got the boys Eric Helms, Matt Gary, and this is the men's IPF 2024 Worlds Recap. Fellas, we had some upsets, we had some controversy, we had some excitement. Um, some of it was hard to call. Some of it was the best battles I've ever seen in my life. And it left an impression. It left an impression. Let's start like we always do. We'll start at the 59s. Wasker Carpio lives up. It was, you know what? Judging by Powerlifting America Nationals, everyone knows he needed to hit that total to qualify for Sheffield and not be relegated to hoping for a wild card. And as a 59, probably going to be difficult getting that wild card because they're looking for head-to-head matchups, etc. And he's not going to be close to the world record. So a lot of things would be working against him for that wild card. He knew what time it was. We all did. He's got to make it by hitting the total 95% of the world record. Did it at Powerlifting America Nationals, that's one thing. But doing it in the US or doing it in Lithuania, sorry, outside the US is a whole nother. And when it came time, that final deadlift to lock it in, let's be honest, that got scary for a moment there. For a half a second there, when I was watching it live, it looked dicey. It looked like, oh my God, we might be waiting another year. It was dramatic. He obviously did lock it out with a hell of a scrap. Difficult to scrap on sumo. And as soon as he locks it out, the emotions come and holy crap, he's done it. Drops down to his knees, starts crying on the platform. It's very dramatic. And all of this, despite the fact, I mean, there was no opposition that was going to vie for his world title, but locking in that total was the key. And it wasn't the same pathway as Powerlifting America. Matt, maybe take us through this. You knew the total you needed, but it was a slightly different pathway this time, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, you're right, Ryan. The squats and the benches essentially turned out to be a mirror performance of what we did at PA Nationals. I mean, he squatted 222 and a half, which was kind of our B option there. We were projecting potentially going to 225, but I think we went for that high percentage make and wanted to make sure that we, didn't miss there on the squat. I mean, you can't really miss a squat because then that's going to put us behind the 8 ball in terms of hitting that total. So we matched what we did at PA Nationals, and then his bench was only 0.5 behind. Obviously, at PA Nationals, we were able to chip an American record there. So he benched 147.5. And both of those numbers from Wascor's standpoint were 3B options. We were potentially, as I said, projecting a 225 squat and potentially a 150 bench. So when we kind of surveyed the scene there at subtotal, we just ran the math and we knew matter of factly, okay, now we need a 267.5 kilo deadlift. So I had talked to Waskar before and just hats off to him, man. I mean, first and foremost, this guy executes like a pro, but also he's just so coachable in the moment. And we had discussed this potentially before. And I said, hey, look, if we have to take our B options, we're going to adjust your deadlift plan. And are you willing to do that? And he said, absolutely. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Obviously, the first goal is to secure the W, and the second goal is to hit the 95% mark for Sheffield. So like the pro that he is, he was able to adjust on the fly. I adjusted his warm-ups. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be coming out with a video about this, explaining kind of how we managed to load and got him to that end number so that we could save as much gas in the tank, so to speak, for that final deadlift. And so the deadlifts, if you notice, the attempts were slightly different than they were at PA Nationals. At PA Nationals, he opened with 245. Here, we actually pulled the deadlift down. We were a little bit less concerned about his opposition. I mean, albeit, Antoine Garcia, had a phenomenal meet, and was, I mean, finished at 27.5 kilos behind us. But we essentially had the meet wrapped up with Waskar's second deadlift, which put us obviously in the pole position to put 267.5 on the third. And so each of those attempts were slightly lighter, the first two attempts, than what he did at PA Nationals. Again, the rationale was to save gas in the tank, give him as much energy as he could possibly have for that third attempt. Because when you factor in all the things, that we talk about, all the different variables, the stricter judging, the stricter standards, now he doesn't have the chip and play and all these different things, and the accumulated fatigue of the day, the short flights, travel, et cetera, et cetera. That's what our rationale was, is like, let's save as much gas as we possibly can, as opposed to going big on the second and taking 2 cracks at this thing. We saved as much gas as we could. And he went out and, like the pro that he is, he hit 267.5. And like you said, Ryan, it was a scrap. It was a tough lift, but he made it. And now Waskar proved that he can do this on the international stage under the highest and strictest standards. And so just really proud of him.
It was awesome to
Eric,
see.
what do you think about the 59s here?
Yeah, it was really good to see. Like, I think it's hard to not want to root for Wasker, and I definitely was. And seeing him have a 9 for 9 day and really milk everything that he could have gotten out of himself was awesome to see. And he earned it, man. And I think the really interesting story. So that was kind of one storyline in the 59s. The other storyline was, what's the rest of the podium look like?
Mhm.
And what we saw was, in my opinion, a really great performance by Antoine Garcia, and then a unfortunately kind of variable performance by Ivan Campano. And I think even if like attempt selection had gone a little differently, some makes had been made and some misses had not been missed. I'd said that wrong, but you know what I'm saying. I think you would still probably see Antoine Garcia in second place because he didn't leave a lot of kilos on the platform. He only missed his third deadlift and his third squat, and he went up in both cases 5 kilos. So there's maybe some other planet where he'd gone up 2.5 on those, and he's finishing at like 615. But he was definitely was not going to be able to reach Waskar, but seemed to be ahead of Ivan Campano, who left a lot of kilos on the squat, unfortunately. And I think, but even if he'd gotten those, like let's say he'd finished on 210 or something like that, because if I recall correctly, I think he missed 212 twice on his second and third squat.
Yep.
I don't see him making up that ground. And I think that was a little bit, I don't know if I'd call that an upset, but I think that was a little bit of a surprise based upon prior performances. Antoine Garcia really kind of showed up and said, "Hey, I'm not done here. I'm still improving. I'm chasing." And it makes me excited to see some future battles in that class. With that said, Ivan is still young. I think people forget that he is out of the 3 gentlemen on the platform. I think he's the youngest out of them. So there might be some future movement there, which would be good. And I think if he can clean up his performances, that'll be pretty good to see. But yeah, I found that to be pretty cool to see 2 people finishing over 600. Antoine Garcia kind of surprising a little bit everybody. And yeah, if Ivan had a slightly better day, we would have had 3 600 plus people on the platform. He finished at 59 or 597 and missed 2 squats. So and I think 1 bench as well that he had to retake his opener. So yeah, it was a good class, and I think we're going to see more competitiveness coming out of the 59s. Yeah, and there was a lot of people clustering right around, like fighting for that bronze medal spot, which, because this year everyone is fighting for the World Games spot by making top 3, I think that was pretty exciting watching everyone try to reach that bronze medal position.
I think the 59 kilo class is definitely leveling up. Ivan didn't have the day that he wanted. He's capable of far more in 597.5. In the gym, I think he came close to 630. Me, the final dead came out of his hands, and he shows potential. He's definitely young, born in 2001, so he's technically still a junior. I don't know if he's signed up for Junior Worlds, if he's going to go and try to get some redemption there, because I think he's more capable than he showed. Ended up on the podium. We're going to see him at World Games. We're obviously going to see him at Worlds again as well. So let's see what he does. But I think in terms of where this division is, Gene coming in at 590, Ishtiak coming in with 582.5. The 59s are as healthy as we've ever seen. And if Fedoshenko comes back and we have that ultimate showdown with Wasker, I don't know if he's going to come back. But if Fedo comes back and we have that showdown, that would be the cherry on top to push the 59s over. They have a lot of things going for them, including a popular champion with a phenomenal background story who can talk, charismatic, good-looking kid, commands people's attention when he's on the platform, and he's got a dramatic storyline now right to Sheffield, so great moments happen on the platform, emotional. Everything's great for 59s. World representation, it's great. we're missing a showdown.
Mhm.
Give us the return of a GOAT and the rising young kid who's like cocky. I'm going to bump him off. I'll be the first one to put a 2 next to his name. And the GOAT clapping back, saying, many have tried, but everybody's failed, and then disappeared. I hope you don't disappear like everybody else when I hand you your L. And it's perfect. If we just have that, if he comes back, the 59s can be just like the 66s. And let's talk about the 66s, gentlemen. I said when this session was finished, this was the greatest session I'd ever commentated on. I'm going to stand on that one. If people want to say the 83s with Jern's final pull was the biggest single moment, I could agree with that. I never felt that before live there anyways. But in terms of overall battle, no, the 83s weren't a 5-way battle. This 66s was absolutely insane. I know in the 63s we had 3 women who finished with the same total on the podium, separated by body weight in 2022,
Mhm.
but that was different.
Yeah.
That was somewhat
Yeah.
overshadowed. Leah Bavois missing weight, not being there, etc. It didn't feel quite the same.
I was
Um,
going to say the exact same thing, Ryan. Yeah.
it was different.
Yeah.
This was crazy. 3 of these gentlemen, you have a 2-time world champion in Penna, the current unofficial world record holder in Jonathan Garcia, and the current official world record holder in Kasim Sand. Nothing but world class across the board there.
Mhm.
And all of them, exact same total. 707.5, only body weight separates them. And off podium, Joe Jordan going 9 for 9. Kyoto, who threatened, and then, 74 kilo former world champ Alexander Eriksson finishing in 6th. You had so much in terms of storyline and depth at these 66s. And these gentlemen, I mean, Kyoto's fast start in the squats, going 3 for 3 in his final squat when he jumped towards the crowd and yelled, the momentum, you felt the presence of momentum on Kyoto. You start thinking, oh my God, is today going to be the day? But even in commentary, I said, he's a killer on squats, right through to the deadlifts, essentially. And after the first deadlift is usually when it starts unraveling for Kyoto. Unfortunately, here we freaking are. And it started unraveling for Kyoto on the second and third deadlifts. And it's a pattern. It's a pattern now. It's got to be fixed. Last Worlds, Sheffield, and here we are at Worlds again. Kyoto has a wealth of talent, but he's got to fix that if he's going to live up to his potential talent. And Joseph Jordan, so Kyoto finishing in 5th by missing his second and third deadlifts. Kyoto pulling to cover ground on his third deadlift, despite missing his second, going up 5 kilos regardless, because he's in the hunt and he's going to go out on his shield. But the second deadlift wasn't convincing, obviously, and it wasn't going to look like the third would. Joe Jordan, a little bit perplexed. I'm not sure what the story here is. He went 9 for 9, but he cruised to 4th. I'm not sure. Maybe that was topping. I don't know if there was a story in the background where that he couldn't press a little more. But he's had bigger. He's had a bigger total, and he cruised for 4th. I was a little surprised. Maybe he wouldn't, or his team wouldn't put a little more foot on the gas and press for podium. You went 9 for 9, and that's good, but you cruised to a 4th place. And I would peg him as a podium contender. He's totaled 700 kilos, 707.5. I don't think is beyond his means. Now I offer, I don't know what he's dealing with, so maybe that's the best he could. Maybe that was foot on the gas all the way on that day. Maybe. But I was a stitch surprised while it was happening live. I remember telling myself, I think this young man's got to press a little harder. You want to go 9 for 9, but what are your goals here, young man? Because I peg you as a podium threat. And then what are you going to say about Panagiotis? 2 for 3 in the squats, absolute grinder on the second with 247.5, massive bench with 175. And then that second deadlift, I can offer a little bit of insight, gentlemen, because I know it's going to come up. But in terms of the attempt selection, that second deadlift, the French team highly puts a lot on representation at the World Games. And I believe they their second deadlift, their plan, not Penna's. Penna is pull for the win. I'm going for the win. Couldn't care less about podium. Couldn't care less about world games. France was get him secured to world games, then try to go for the world record, or sorry, the world title, but don't jeopardize the world title for in world games. It's world games first, and then all right, now we go for gold. Unfortunately, that means two top end deadlifts back to back, and that first deadlift saps Penna. Could he have had 287.5 if he did it on his second and didn't do 285 on his second? Well, that's the tough pill to swallow. Penn will be looking back, but Team France would say, "We got you to World Games. We solidified it. You might have missed it anyways, and then you wouldn't be going to World Games." And for them, not worth. It's tough. You got to weigh it all out. And then of course I'll let Matt talk about Jonathan Garcia and what can you say about Kasim Sand? Only misses opening deadlift, but ends up with 297.5. Probably had some room in the tank if we're honest. If he had to pull more, he probably would have. Um, Eric, what are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, no, I will second what you said. I think this is probably the most exciting flight I've ever watched in powerlifting. If you had rewinded the session before that, I would have gone with 84 pluses last year. If you were to fast forward ahead of that, I would have then upped, like, let's say I didn't see the 66s and I watched the 84 pluses of this year. I'd be like, no, it was this year's 84 pluses, just because of the stellar performances. And then this, I think, is just a bit ahead of that. I was going to say the exact same thing, that the only time that I'm aware of, at least at the world class level, we've seen three totals finish on the same number and have it being decided by body weight was 2022. But that was with the knowledge that if Leah Babel had made weight, that would have been second through fourth rather than first through third. So this was a legitimate tied podium. And considering that the 66 is not too long ago, we're not a very competitive class. It speaks to how much the ranks of powerlifting are filling out, to where we're seeing this participation at the highest level come from this surge of people involved in powerlifting. And I thought it was really interesting. A couple things for those who are maybe some minor subtle details to kind of round out the picture. I was concerned about Panna's potential from his opener on squats. Like his best squat, I believe, in competition is 260. And he said he's been working on squats. And one of the things I said in the preview show was, he's saying that, but he's not showing a lot of squats. I'm concerned that maybe that squat just has not been improving the way he wants in training. And when I saw him open at 240, now, if you were not on the French team and if you followed, let's say, more traditional attempt selection metrics, someone who opens at 240, you actually expect them to be finishing around 260. And you might think, oh, like he's in a good position. But the French team and Panna especially, they open quite heavy and then they only add a small amount. So when I saw that he opened on 240, I was like, he's not going to be going for the kind of numbers that are going to put him in a PR position. And he needs a big squat to not be in an absolute dogfight. And I think that was at the start where I was like, I don't know if Penna is going to be able to pull this off. And I think he had a very good performance on the platform, 707.5. I mean, come on, like that's the best total he's ever put up on the platform. So it's not to take anything away from Panna. I think prior to this performance, 705 might have been his best. So he improved, and he didn't really leave a whole lot left on the platform. But I kind of echo your thoughts, Ryan, and I'd be curious to know their strategy. And I'll let the game day master himself talk about his thoughts on that, which is a nice way for me to not be mean or only say nice things and just speculate and ask questions. But I was really, really impressed with Kasim Sand and Jonathan Garcia. Man, talk about like when you watch it and you see, okay, I missed my second squat and I've got to go up. I missed my opener deadlift and I've got to go up. Like those moments, like you go, of course it makes sense. He's in a dogfight, you got to do it. But the emotional state you have to manage as a coach and a lifter to do that and know that you're risking placing not just losing a spot on the podium, but losing a spot, period. That those are the type of decisions where they're high risk, high reward to a level that I think most people can't comprehend. That is at the world level, you've qualified, you've gone through everything you've done to have your shot at being a world champion. And you think about Jonathan Garcia's history. He's got the unofficial world record that he set. He was the national champion, and this is his shot. But because it's also, a World Games year, there's so much on the line that he has to do that. But such high risk, high reward. So I think kudos to him and kudos to you, Matt. Those decisions are not easy, and to come out on top twice when doing that I think it's a statement to being a clutch player, if you will. So that was really cool to watch. I thought that was incredibly exciting. It was also great that this is such an exciting session that you had to watch the B session. You got to know where former world champ cutting, where is Alexander Eriksson going to finish? And he didn't necessarily perform as well as maybe we speculated he could possibly, but he did fantastic. I think he did a very good job, and he made himself a barrier to other people. Like, oh, we got to think about how do we get into the 690 plus range because of his performance in the B session. So they're navigating that. And then as much as Kyoto is a threat on squats, like you were talking about, similar to Pana, I could tell by where he was opening that his top end squats, he ended about, I think, 7 kilos lower than what he has done in competition before. I was like, oh, he's going to have to pull something huge. And it was exciting, even though it didn't look like that third deadlift was a high probability make, that he was actually pulling not only to get on the platform, but because the platform was all tied, he would have gone all the way and won the 66s if he'd pulled that third deadlift, which I think, like you said, Ryan, it wasn't like we were all there like, oh, is he going to make it or not? Anybody will see. But let's remember that he's actually pulled in competition 300 kilos before. So putting 295 on the bar, even though on that day it didn't look like it was likely, and with how variable of a lifter he is, part of me was like, this dude actually might. There's a world where this happens. So to say it was an exciting session is a dramatic understatement, in my opinion. So I was glued to my seat watching the 66s, even though I was not there physically live. So no, it was incredible. And I think if anyone has not gone back and watched the replay, did not catch it live, I would highly encourage you to, because it is some riveting competitive stuff, man. So I'll leave it there.
The back and forth seesaw battle was absolutely phenomenal. And at the end, to have all of those lifters pulling for the win, all of those lifters from Kyoto to Pena to Kasim-san to Garcia pulling to secure their position, and all three landing on 707.5, but having different journeys to the same destination. And Pena, in true Pena form, absolute grinder second, absolute squat grinder second deadlift, extending his bench like he needed to grab those extra kilos. I mean, they all had phenomenal days, and he was close on that third. Oh, so close. Which obviously begs the question, if that wasn't his third and that was his second. Ooh. But then, of course, if you want to play that game, you have to, with respect to Kasim-san fans and himself would be like, hey, man, I thought I had more on my third as well. Like, you can't only redo one guy's numbers for him. You got to redo mine as well. Let's see. So fair enough. It is what it is. We all land at 707.5. Kasim-san, the rightful 66 kilo world champion, in the best session I've ever seen. Matt, you were in the midst of this battle. You were one of the players in there. You guys came away with the silver medal. Well, walk us through this.
It's I thought that this session would be a lot like the 93s in that it was a race to 9 attempts. And so I felt like, and each combatant, if you will, would get there a different way. When you look at Pena, he's probably the most well-rounded of the 3 podium finishers, right? Kasim-san is clearly the best deadlifter. And then you've got Garcia, who builds his total, or the lion's share of his work is done on the front end in the subtotal. And so just from his perspective, we knew that we had to take advantage of building as big of a subtotal as we possibly could, and then kind of literally and figuratively hanging on for dear life with trying to make as many deadlifts as we could at the end. Unfortunately, the way that it unfolded for us was Jonathan missed a second squat, and it was odd because he missed it on a technicality. And what wound up happening was he actually beat the squat command. And so if you go back and you watch the live stream in international competition, and I'm not going to go off on a long tangent about the referees, but I put in air quotes, the side referees, because in international competition, oftentimes it almost looks like we have 3 head referees or 3 chief referees or whatever you want to call that. But we had, I believe it was Paul Marsh in the head chair, and then we've got the 2 side referees who are sitting at approximately 11 and 1 o'clock, almost 10 and 2, something like that. And so they have their hands raised, and the requirement is the side referees keep their hands raised until they're satisfied with the lifter's elected position, which means they're standing erect, their hips are locked, and their knees are locked. And once that position is achieved, the side referees drop their hands. And so because they're all kind of sitting up front there, for whatever reason, Jonathan, I believe, just kind of had this brain cramp moment where he saw one of the side referees throw their hand down, and he likes to squat quickly, and he immediately dropped. And I think it was kind of simultaneously with the time that Paul was saying squat, but he beat him by a little bit. And unfortunately, Ty doesn't go to the runner. And like I said, he probably beat him just by a stitch. And so that call, I think, originally went in our favor 2-1, but then it was overruled by the jury when they found out that he jumped the squat command. So we had to make the calculus there, as Eric was saying. You know, we're in this dogfight, and it's one of those things where we're building the lion's share of our total with our squat. We had world record aspirations. Clearly, that is now off the table, but we have to kind of do this calculus and how much do we go up and risk. And so we decided to not go up the full amount that we would normally go up. So we went up kind of to our B amount, or maybe even our C amount. So we went up 7.5 kilos. And then of course, lo and behold, Jonathan winds up smoking 270, probably had 5 kilos left in the tank. And we're kind of beating ourselves to death at the point. You know, we're saying, gosh, we should have had 5 kilos, but you don't go into that third attempt armed with the, you know, the knowledge that he's going to hit it like that. And oh, by the way, let's say that he does squat, you know, the top end third attempt, and then we get a jury overturn, and now we're stuck with our opener at 250, and you know, we're the laughing stock of the world. And oh, by the way, now we've slipped off the podium. So these are all calculations that you have to have in the moment. He and I and Arian had a fantastic strategy call. We had discussed a lot of this stuff, so we pretty much had a play called. We went with 270. Then we go into the benches, and I'll tell you, I have never seen Jonathan Garcia's benches show up like they did. We actually went above our top end. We were projecting a 175 top end for his third attempt, and we went off plan, off script, and went to 177. And you know what? He had another 5 kilos. I mean, he absolutely destroyed his third attempt. So again, you know, I'm catching flack on social media, you know, after the fact, revisionist history, Monday morning quarterback. Why didn't you add more to his bench? Well, we did add more. We had no idea that he had the extra 5 kilos. Had we been armed with that ammunition, you know, from the get-go, then yeah, we would have gone to 182.5, 182.5 on that third attempt. Now, granted, the first and second attempt, the first and second attempt. Go ahead, Ryan.
I just want to offer perspective to back you up here. Like at nationals earlier that year, he did 172.5. Competition before that, 170. Competition before that, 172.5. Competition before that, 170. So this was 7.5 to 5 kilos more than he had been doing, to your point. So ahead of time, again, if you overreached and missed, everybody's throwing egg on your face. He blows it up, and you gave him more than he historically was doing in comp. And of course, everybody's like, what the hell were you thinking?
Yeah, why didn't you give him more? So, like I said, we went off plan, we went off script, we gave him 177, he smoked it, and so we're in the lead at subtotal, you know, by the tune of 25 kilos ahead of Penna, and we're ahead of Kasim San with the understanding that he's a big deadlifter. Now we have to go into deadlifts, and it's like, look, we've got to make 3 pulls. And so unfortunately on his opener, he had that kind of, we call it a speed bobble at the top that you'll oftentimes, you know, or you'll occasionally see with sumo, where the lifter stands up so quickly that they lose control of the bar at the very, very top, and they kind of dip and rock forward and then rock back. And so clearly it was a 3 red lift, you know, 3 red light lift. And, you know, we're not going to take it over again, because then the ground that we have to cover then, if we repeat the opener and then start to do the math, the jump that we are then going to have to take, you know, for Jonathan, who's not, you know, a fantastic deadlifter, is going to be a huge jump. So we took a smaller jump to our second. You know, we pushed our chips to the center of the table, so to speak, went to 260. And if you watch his 260, it looked fantastic. He hit it with strength, with room to spare. And I immediately, my knee-jerk reaction after hitting that 260 was, he's got 10 kilos. Like, it looks like he's got 10 left in the tank. And when he came off and he talked to Aaron and I think I put in 270 as a placeholder or something like that. He said, I just want to let you know I'm losing my grip. My left hand is opening. So if you go back to the live stream and you watch that lift and you focus in on Jonathan's left hand, you will see that his hand is beginning to open on the 260. So he's got all the hip and back strength in the world to hinge a deadlift and stand up with the weight. Crap, he could, I mean, with straps, Lord knows what he could pull. You know what I mean? But we don't use straps in the IPF. So we had to drop his deadlift to 265. Then unfortunately it just popped out of his hand. And then it's like, you know, you always say, Ryan, your total's in, you're done for the day, and you're watching everybody else, you know, kind of shoot for the number that you've put up on the board. And clearly with Kasim Sand waiting in the wings, he can pick his spots, and he's a phenomenal deadlifter. And that's what he did. The attempt selection, going back to Panna for a second, to your point, Ryan, was a little curious. You know, taking 285 on the second attempt. Again, apparently, to your point, they prioritize World Games, selection over the win, and that's understandable. And also, I guess, in their defense, they are making an attempt call armed with the knowledge that we haven't even gotten on the board yet. So they put in their 285 with the understanding that we missed 252 and a half. So they are, matter of factly, trying to add 15 kilos to their total. Now, that's kind of a chip in their favor. Having said that, I do believe that they should have looked at the scoreboard and seen, you know what, we jumped to 260. If we take 285, we are going to land on their total and be behind on body weight. So to me, that's kind of a dead number. I think, to your point, Ryan, I think 287.5 would have gone. I think Penna would have been able to get that on his second attempt because he just barely missed it on his third. And so for the way that they kind of strategically call attempts, yeah, why not put 287.5? I mean, personally, no, I would have taken a lower second to leave room for the third, then kind of play the game and strategically aim after that. But I know that that's how they call attempts. So, I mean, that's how it turned out. And it's just, when you look at the podium, Kasim Sand went 8 for 9. Jonathan, unfortunately, only made 6. And Panna made 7. And that's kind of how it shook out. And to your point, Joe Jordan, was there in 4th on a 9 for 9 day. It looked like he had room in the tank. Kyoto was a bit back, and Erickson and so forth. And so anyway, it was an unbelievable competition, but that's kind of how it unfolded from our point of view. And it is very frustrating. Anytime a lifter misses an attempt, part of the things that I say to myself are, obviously a lifter can miss on a technicality or poor execution, and that's their fault. Like, I can't go out on the platform and make the lift for them. But when they miss on strength, which wasn't the case in this situation, it was his grip. I kind of asked myself, did I not pick the appropriate number for that attempt, or did I not set them up with the preceding attempt that left enough gas in the tank for the third? And so, you're going to look back at kind of how we coach this and possibly second guess yourself a little bit. And, we'd like to have some of those lifts back, but that's sports. And sometimes you end up on the wrong side of it. And sometimes, as Kasim Sand did, you're able to pull for the win. And I think, as you said, Ryan, Kasim Sand probably had his third deadlift look comfortable. It didn't look limit. So even if we'd have had a few extra kilos, look, we don't know if he's going to, he's clearly going to line up and take his shot, right? But that's kind of how the day unfolded from our perspective. And it was just a riveting and thrilling session to be a part of.
Well, more context. That third deadlift of 265, Garcia's hit that before. And in terms also, for more context, you ask yourself, what if he didn't do 260 for his second? Would he have hit 265? Well, he's done that before as well. He's done 260 for a second and 265 for a third. It's exactly what he did at US Nationals. So in terms of you picking those numbers, like, he's done it before. He's done exactly that before. And if he just did what he's previously done again at Worlds when it counted, he'd be a world champ. So in terms of like overly guessing, should you have, I mean, history is the best indicator of the future. You played with what you had. I think I think you did the right calls in terms of the second and third deadlift. And to be completely honest further, Kasim Sand probably, if he needed another 2.5 kilos, I would, and you gave me $1 million and said bet, I bet he had another 2.5 kilos anyways. So I wouldn't overly lose too much sleep over it. And just the fact that, look, it's really easy for people to say you should have loaded up when you're missing and still going up anyways, and you did
Yeah,
that a
right.
couple of times.
Twice.
People aren't giving you enough props for the guts to make that call and it pays off, because if it didn't swing your way, they would crucify you. You went up anyways, and it's because you did this, because you did that, blah, blah, blah. And then
Right.
how much do you go up? Because if you go up too far and miss your third and you don't have a second, now you only have your first, and you're not on podium, you're not going to world games, you're not nothing. You're gone. And
Yeah.
it's real easy. You got 60 seconds making these calls. You got all this going. You're like, look, we're going to go to option B or C, and we're still in the hunt. And you were. And
Right.
you were right up until the last deadlift, which he's previously hit.
Yeah.
He just didn't hit it on that day.
Right.
You literally had the winning deadlift in his hands potentially. That could have broke the three-way tie if he hit it, and he's hit it before. So, whatever. People are gonna audit you. That's what we do in sports. It
Yeah.
is what it is.
It's fair. It's fair.
Right?
I've got big shoulders. So
Yeah, yeah. You gotta take it. But yeah, what a fantastic freaking battle that was. Moving along into the 74 kilo class, fellas. This was essentially okay. Well, let me throw this. I'll get your take on it afterwards, Matt. But Eric,
Mhm.
this was the Austin Perkins show. How dominant was Austin Perkins? It was not only a dominant performance winning the title, it's 2.5 kilos below Taylor Atwood's big 838.5. And Austin, somewhat on cruise control for this, wins it, takes best lifter. However, he's got a lot of kilos on his total now. It makes Sheffield more interesting. As a fan, this makes Sheffield far more interesting. What did you think?
How dominant was it? Let me tell you how dominant Austin Perkins' performance was. I'm glad you mentioned that he won best lifter, because the person who took second best lifter was Kel Beckland in the same weight class, totaling 812 behind his 836, meaning that the person who he very clearly beat in the same weight class as him was literally on coefficient the second best lifter out of the entire group of men. And considering the amazing performances we saw in the men's division, I think that goes to tell you how much of a unique talent Austin Perkins is, which is really mind-blowing when you think about it. So with that said, I think we really do need to give Kel some props, because his performances lately, especially in the stage of his career where he's coming back, he's in his mid 30s. And, he had what many people would think probably his peak in his run when he was battling with Taylor Atwood. And now he is here battling like the second coming of Taylor Atwood, if you will, then the new dominant force that is just as much of an outlier in this current era as Taylor was. And I'm not saying Taylor's done. I'm curious to see what the future holds. And he is, he went from an 800 total to an 815 total. And if you were to watch his training and listen to him talk, there's, if he had a great day, maybe Kel is pushing, 830 or something like that on this day. So I think it was a really impressive performance by Kel. It didn't quite perfectly materialize on game day. And you can't just have 15-kilo bumps every competition you do like the momentum has to end at some point. So him totaling 812, I think was extremely respectable. Obviously, second best performance technically on coefficient in the entire comp. And it was good to see him doing that, because and having all this momentum coming into this meet more broadly, because I think it made, and I'm curious to hear, Matt's thoughts. I think it made Austin go, listen, we actually do have to push it a little bit here, because if I just kind of do the bare minimum of what's needed to, like just take the current, numbers and leave them there, there's a chance that I get snuck, and so I need to put actually some kilos between me and Kel. And while that's not necessarily great for Austin's, like wallet when it comes Sheffield time, because now he's made it a lot harder on himself to have a significant improvement on the world record to where he's outpacing everyone else. It has actually made the coming Sheffield more exciting to watch, because he's now no longer this very, very clear favorite based upon how the Sheffield is scored, based upon the percentage that you get above the world record. So in many ways, I think it has made the future a little more exciting and a little more of a dogfight in the coming Sheffield. But I think ultimately, when you really just look at the numbers, we kind of had three individuals in first, second, and third kind of running their own race. And all three of them did very well. You know, Kell, like I said, second best lifter in the meet, only 2.5 kilos off his best performance. Tim Monagatti moving up just a little bit from his best performance, securing third, punching his ticket to World Games. And then you've got a stellar performance by Austin Perkins, where he still has a little bit left, which is exciting to see. So, yeah, I think if you want to know how dominant, to answer your question, was Austin Perkins, he won the 74s and the second best lifter in the entire men's side of IPF Worlds was the person he beat in his weight class. So he is head and shoulders above what we would consider the best lifter out of everyone. So it was pretty cool to see, and he did not disappoint for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he opened up on a world record. His
Yep.
very first lift of the world championships was a world record. Talk about living up to the hype. And then
Mhm.
the next two lifts were world records. And then, of course, the total itself was a world record. I mean, in terms of, I mean, he's best lifter in his
Yep.
very first world championships. Yeah, he lived up to the hype. No question about that. And in terms of if he was going to fly close to the world record, not overly extend or, you just saw the day after how you can't take things for granted when you're just hanging around the world record, how the rest of the world lifters can pop up on you. And Perk came on the podcast with Chell the very next day and talked about it. And he said straight up how nervous he was. And Chell made him nervous. And
Yeah.
Chell is the deadlift world record holder. He is the best deadlifter in the class ever. And if he's going to pull a rabbit out the hat, he might do it if you're too close. And he could be that freaking, he's the same scenario as Jurens. Same age, father,
Mhm.
full-time job,
Mhm.
and a veteran of the game. He could easily be Jurens. You could
Yep.
easily swap it out and he's Jurens. And you fly too close to the world record and come the deadlift, he's pulling after you. He gets to the side. I'm loading this up. And fucking miracles happen. People just, what happens sometimes. So he was nervous. It was his first world, all the expectation, all the hype, active jury, squat depth, all the conversation that was going on. And they did what they did. Now I'll let Matt walk us through it. So, yes, they extended the world record, they clinched the victory, they got best lifter. Matt, what were your thoughts on this?
The first thing that I want to say is I want to give a shout out to Joshua Wright, who came in
Mm.
fifth from Germany. Just a signature performance from him, and one of the oldest guy in the A group there, a little bit older than Shell. Just a phenomenal performance, man. He went 9 for 9, hit some PB total by 7.5 kilos, and just absolutely lights out. So I just want to tip the cap to Joshua because that was just a stellar performance from our perspective. You damn right, Shell Backlund made us nervous, and I told him that after the meet. I shook his hand and said, "Man, I appreciate you keeping us honest." And I mean, we know all the accolades that Shell is deserving of, and the Goat Slayer, and he's just a legend in the game, and just a true sportsman. And I just love competing against him and coaching against him in the same session. And the way that we were thinking, I mean, Austin executed 9 for 9 day, fantastic performance, irrefutable standard in all the lifts. Probably had a little bit more in the bench, clearly had plenty left in the tank in the deadlift. And yeah, he knocked up the world record total. And like to your point, Ryan, that's going to make the Sheffield conversation, make the fans happy, just because now it makes it a little bit more interesting in Sheffield. But in terms of what we were kind of looking at was, Austin executed like a pro. Chell was clearly having an off day. But you're talking about Mr. Backlund here, who's the world record holder in the deadlift at 340 kilos. And if you go back and watch that lift, the world record that he has of 340 kilos, which was taken at the Arnold Sports Festival earlier this year, he hit it and it was comfy. Okay. That was not a limit lift. And this guy is essentially, And now we've come to find out that up until the last 2 weeks, I mean, he was having the prep of his life. I mean, this guy was having an extraordinary prep. And you know, he looked good for probably 830 to 840 based upon the projections that he was probably having coming off of that kind of prep. And I know that he had to hit the brakes and he had some family stuff and some things happened to him in the last 2 weeks that kind of precluded him from showing the fruits of his labor on game day. But having said that, after our second deadlift with Austin, we came off and we're at 828 and a half. Okay. And I'm running the math and I put in a number and it was a placeholder. And I came back to Austin and I could tell just in his countenance that he's kind of like, you know, thinking, maybe we're done. And I told him, I looked at him and I was like, get ready, man. You're taking a third deadlift. And he goes, we're taking a third one. And I was like, you're damn right we're taking a third one. Because had we just said, you know what, we're done. We've created our total. We're going to hold. Shell would have needed 349 kilos. And I know that that's a big jump from his second to his third. But based upon the fact that if there's anybody who can pull a rabbit out of a hat, it's this guy. And my thought process was, you know what? We're going to go out there and put the final nail in the coffin. And we're going to put this thing to bed. And we're going to make him have to pull something just even more extraordinary into the 350s. And that's kind of what I was thinking all along. So that was our rationale for taking the third deadlift. And we didn't take our top end third deadlift. We knew that Austin had plenty more, but we wanted to just go for a really high percentage make, bump up the total. And, you know, honestly, the Sheffield consideration at that point it wasn't even something that went into our calculus. You know, our thing was, look, I'd much rather have you having to have this conversation of, oh, we pushed the total too high, than you guys got snuck and you guys got caught from behind and so forth after the fact. So that's fine, and we can have that conversation, and you know, people can pile on me and so forth. But anyway, that was kind of our calculus for the final deadlift there of 325 kilos, and took him to 836. And I have no doubt in my mind that Shell would have put 349 on the bar, because he had nothing to lose. He was already securely in second place. And then you're coming into a situation where you know, it's almost like time stops and we have an Enaharo Delaney Wallace moment. And I don't want us sitting in the back, you know, having a conniption fit and a heart attack all at the same time. So that was why.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, there's no way.
Let me just paint this for everybody, because everyone's got 20/20 hindsight. And I think the same people who are saying you won by too much on that day, the very next day, were a little quieter when they saw what happened with Jurgens and Russ. Listen, Shell hit 340 with room. And he was going to stay in the 340s to win it with 349. And can you imagine what they would say about the fucking cocky Americans who didn't come out for the third pull because you thought you won, didn't you? Yeah, you cocky Americans. You didn't come out for the third. You thought you won. And he walks out there and Shell goes 349. And you know how many people rub it in your face? Like, of course, he's got 349. He hit 340 with room months ago. You don't think he can add 9 kilos on his deadlift? He's the greatest deadlifter we've ever seen in the 74s. You don't come out for your third? Look at you guys. That's what you get. You know this is what would happen. You know this is what would happen.
Given the storyline of the sweep that has been being talked about, like, I think I wasn't there, but from talking to people who were physically there, there was definitely maybe a strong anti-American sentiment. So I think people would have loved to have seen that occur in some ways.
For sure.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I'd rather have him have to go for 356.5, which was what he would have needed to win at that point, versus 349. I'm much more comfortable at that point that, you know what, he's not going to come after us. And so that was our rationale, was we're going to go out there, we're going to take a third deadlift. It's a high percentage make. We're going to put the final nail in the coffin, put this thing to bed, and we're done. Versus, like you said, Ryan, be cocky and we'll pass. And then he comes out and throws a Hail Mary at 349, and we're the laughing stock of the championships.
If it's within 10 kilos and he's done 340 and he's only got to hit in the 340s still, 349, you're towing that line, my friend. But if you're like, nah, you know what? He's hit 340. I don't want to make him ask the question in 340s. I want to make him ask the question into the 350s. Now I'm going to feel better. And just put it to bed. Put the bullet in the frickin' zombie's head, please. Don't fire 3 shots in his chest and put your gun down. Don't be that movie. You know what I mean? And the very next day, now I'm not saying Russ coasted or anything. I'm just saying the very next
Yeah.
day we see someone who comes in with like a favorite who had a big total, Elite 60, etc., coming in, and things can change on the world stage when you're dealing with the world's best, and you can't take anything for granted. And I think a lot of people that might have raised their hands, and I get it. Look at sports, man. They're allowed to be fans, and this is what we do with all other sports. You're like, well, I think the coach should have made this call, and why do you put that defensive man in there or whatever? They're allowed to. As a matter of fact, it's good for us. It creates discussion. Good, good, good. I'm just saying, when you're in there and you're making the calls, for God's sake, Matt, just win. Because if you didn't win with perk, if you lost and it was perk you had,
Yeah.
you're done. If you lost with perk, I promise you, you would never be referred to as the game day GOAT. They would take that from you. They'd be like, how do you have the greatest powerlifter in the world and lose a world title? How can you be called the GOAT? They'd take that
Right.
from you. Your whole
Yeah.
legacy changes.
Yeah.
Everything changes. But anyways, it didn't happen. You
Thank God.
you weren't like, we're gonna come out. Thank you. Shell missed his last deadlift, so you win by a crazy spread, whatever.
Yep.
It might not have gone that way. 2020. Okay, he didn't have it on him. He might have. We didn't know that.
Right.
So it is what it is. But and yes, Joshua Wright, Tim Monagatti. I talked to Tim. Tim's going up, and I mean, he said publicly, anyways. He's going back up to 83. So
Right.
whatever happened at 74, that's done. He had a escapade in the 74s, punched his ticket to World Games, collected some medals, was involved in some great battles, was at Sheffield, had a great 74 kilo run all around, to tell you the truth. But now he's ready to go back into 83s. Cool. Let's see what he could do at the 83s. That'll be exciting because he's probably a better powerlifter now than he was previously at 83. Let's see. His second run might be nothing like his first run as an 83. He might level up all over again. So that'll be exciting. And Chun Chin Fan also coming in fourth, by the way. Give a shout out to him. And yeah, so you guys ready to go into the 83s?
Let's do it.
Oof. Yep.
Holy smokes. Powerlifting got flipped onto its ear, gentlemen. I don't even know what to tell you. This started off as Russ being Russ. I'll tell you straight up. My honest opinion, I thought Russ's third was deep enough. I saw the replay just recently reposted. I still think it's deep enough. Doesn't mean Germans can't just load up whatever the hell he wants. So I'm just, this whole robbery talk. I'm not leaning into any entertaining anything like that. This is sports. It was going to be
Ryan?
close. It was a close call. There's by no means is this a robbery. And if you redo something for Russ and give him that squat, you got to redo something for Jerns and let him load up more. Go ahead, Eric.
Ryan, can I ask you a question?
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah.
No, you
Did you
can't.
think? Okay, then you're the host. I'll be gracious.
Oh, God.
Let me ask you this: did you think it was as deep as his squat before it?
As a second,
Yeah.
I'd have to, because I can't remember exactly. I'd have to rewatch it. But I did review the third right before this podcast. I didn't rewatch the second. That's an interesting question. Well, why is that?
So I personally thought that it was borderline, and I would have been fine with either call. But I did think that it did not look as deep as his second. And that is something that I think we all know that catches a jury's eye. Sorry, that catches the ref's eye in general. So I think that's just worth pointing out. I know there's a lot of people who feel like that squat should have gone, but regardless of whether it actually met the technical rules, you're playing with fire if you go into a heavier squat and you cut your depth a little bit, even if both are potentially, depending upon what the refs see, in the hole in the pocket, because it's a change that the human eye will see. So it's just something I wanted to point out.
And as we walk through, and we'll do the same pattern I think we got going here. We'll throw it to Matt to give us the actual how the battle laid out and the decisions and everything. But at this point in the squad event, Jurens goes 3 for 3, ends off with 310. So Russell only goes forward with 321, which is a world record, collects a chip, and has that third that could have went either way, goes against him by the jury overturn, which is gotta be tough. Now, at the time, you're still thinking, wow, Russ has done 860. We've seen him, I mean, as a 90 kilo guy, his top end's crazy, but I mean, it's not 90 kilo here. It's just, it's Russell Orhe. You just can't picture it until it happens. At what, like, he's not going to lose. He's a multiple time world champion. He's been the number one 83 since 2019. And so at this point, you're not, or at least I myself in the commentary booth was not overly thinking an upset is about to happen. Not yet. But I could see that it's going to be closer than we had anticipated. And it was going to be a battle. But anyways, moving along. Enohoro goes 3 for 3, ends off with 282.5. The rest of the field, they're a little ways back in terms of the overall hunt. Most of these guys weren't going to end up over 800. And, well, as a matter of fact, they did not. Those three did. Going into the bench press, Russ ends off with 187.5. Jurens ends off with 185. Russ, good enough for a silver medal. Jurens, fourth. And Enohoro, in typical Enohoro fashion, he comes in 18th on bench press. He is way back at 157.5, misses 162.5. And here we are into the deadlifts. Eduardo goes 3 for 3. The rest of the field, etc. They're trailing at this point. But now when we get into the deadlifts, Eric, what were you thinking upon Russell Orhe, Jurens, and Enohoro when the deadlifts open up? And in your perspective.
To be honest, I really did think Russ had enough to not have to worry about anyone sneaking him from behind. I want to actually shift the focus a bit to Jurens and how much this was an improvement upon where he was. If we recall how he had a disappointing performance that he was quite public about at Worlds last year, and then he was able to kind of quote unquote redeem himself at Silent Worker. Let's talk about those totals. Like what was just last year, a redemption total for Jurens was 823.5, if I recall correctly. I think he did that at Euros, and then he did 812 at Silent Worker, and at Worlds he was in the high. I think he did like 790, right? So yeah. So there you go. So like his totals, like a top end for him was scrapping it out in like the low 800s, and if he's having a good time and things go well, he had a stellar 9 for 9 performance at Euros in Croatia and went 823.5. So I don't think it would have been reasonable to go, oh yeah, so what's a good day for Jurens? Like, yeah, 840, 850. Like, no, I don't think that was what people expected, even with a good prep. So to be in Russ's position, I would have felt relatively secure based upon that kind of like watching the ops, you know what I'm saying? So I think the storyline here is not an underperformance on Russ's side. I think it is a stellar performance on Jurens. And by the way, shout out to me. He said, listen, this wasn't an outlier either. I think in Silent Worker he just totaled 850. Am I wrong, Ryan?
You did.
And so if you talk to the British, they were like, this wasn't an upset. I'm like, this wasn't an upset. What Jurens wasn't Jurens himself was like, look, and I thought I was the underdog, and I thought I was scrapping out for a silver, and maybe I push. Maybe I make a push. I wasn't thinking coming into this we were going to win. But people are literally trying to rewrite history as though Jurens was the favorite to win this, and this wasn't an upset. And then they're like, okay, well, he was the underdog, but it's not an upset. That doesn't make sense. When the underdog wins, it's an upset win. If it's a minor upset, tell me it's a minor upset. If it's a major upset, tell me it's a major. But don't tell me you're an underdog and you win and it's not an upset. That's not how it works. Every single time the underdog wins, it's an upset. You don't get to say it's not. That's just the way it is. And I kid you not, the mental gymnastics I went through after the Germans win with people trying to tell me this wasn't a surprise, this wasn't an upset, this wasn't all right. Well, look at Jones himself was going in here not telling himself, I'm going to kick the shit out of Russ. Now, I'm sure Jones' confidence levels is right through the roof because, yeah, to your point, he did 850 at Silent Worker, and now he's in the 850s. And we're previously, you can do rep work in prep for a competition. When you haven't cut, you haven't traveled, and it's rep work in prep. But in competition, he was not pulling 350 before.
Right.
Now he is. And all the reps, sometimes a set of 4 adds up to this for one guy, and a set of 4 adds up to something else for someone else. If you look at his previous totals, this is not 850 is not what he was previously putting up. Whatever, it's just, it is what it is. And my God, his Jones arrived. That week,
his
winning the
last
world title.
5 competitions, he's gone 9 for 9 out of 4 of them, and 8 for 9 in 1, with steady improvements marching up into the mid 800s. So he is on fire right now, and I think that just needs to be acknowledged that this is certainly not something you'd predict. Like Jones, like getting over the rough worlds he had last year and like putting together a good total. We're talking 830. Right? Not 850. There's another 20 kilos that are just like, whoa, hey, whoa, let's talk about how much this improvement was there. So I think it was, maybe British powerlifting and all the British powerlifters were seeing some things and they knew some things, and at least for the data available to the rest of the world watching, this was a stellar improvement upon where he was, and the hat's off to him.
Look, in March he did 823.5, and in June he did 850. All right, so seeing that out of a 35-year-old man, full-time job, kids, the whole nine, to be like, and this guy who did 823.5 in March, and be like, yeah, in 3 months he'll be doing 850. I mean, you don't just see that every day. You don't just say like, yeah, of course. You know what I mean? Like, for people to be like, how did you not see this coming? It's like, what do you look at? Like, he usually doesn't. And a lot of times, like, only when it works in his favor. You often see people killing it in the gym and then be like, well, I was killing the gym. But then when you say it in a preview show, people are like, oh, Ryan, everybody kills it in the gym. It's what happened on the platform that counts. So then when you go conservative with your predictions, people like, how did you not see what he was doing? It's like, all right, well, there's no winning on this, right? It just is what it is. You just whatever. The point is, though, what happened, even Russell or he himself, same day afterwards, and it's hurt. This one hurt. Russ had tears in his eyes in the back. Most of these guys do. Kind of tears in his eyes in the back when he lost his world title. Because it matters to them. It means something to them. They want it. It's not okay. It's not okay for them. It's not supposed to be. You lose and you're a champion, it better be uncomfortable. You better not sit with it well. It'll force change. If you don't think Russ wants that taste out of his mouth, you're crazy. If you don't think he's coming hard at Sheffield, you're crazy. It's going to be wild. And the fact that Jurens a week later did 850, if Russ is 860 and Jurens is 850 and Russ is 860 domestically.
Yep. Can I say something, Ryan? I think Russ brings a mentality to the sport that is very common in mainstream American sports media. He even fashions himself after like a Deion Sanders, and he thinks about the way he wants to be perceived and cultivating an image. And I think that's very easy. As someone, I can say this, an American who is also now a Kiwi. I'm a dual citizen. I live in a foreign country. The way that I'll say swagger, not bravado, is perceived can often be inflammatory or seem ingracious or not humble to people from other countries. But I hope people saw that the grace and the professionalism that Russ displayed in placing second indicates something about that. You know, it is a style. It is an approach. And yeah, there's some things that, you know, Russ has said in the past, or I roll my eyes at it as an American. But I think it's just important to remember that having that degree of confidence and swagger and bringing kind of a less of an individual sport mindset to powerlifting, it's going to happen with the top athletes from the US because we're going to inherit our best talent from team sports. It's just the nature of where do our best athletes go. And then as powerlifting grows and the talent pool is higher, we're going to see people coming from these other sports and probably football, where we do a lot of weightlifting. And I think just what really is the mark of character in someone is not how they handle a win or not the bravado they talk to, but how do they treat others? And then how do they handle losing? And I just want to give Russ a shout out for being a professional in the way he reacted to that. Because there's a lot of times where you do see, you know, athletes really take the L in a way that is unprofessional, you know, and crying about being taken down by the refs and not taking any personal responsibility. And I think any true champion uses their losses as opportunities to learn to be better. And I absolutely think that does describe Russ. So I just wanted to give him a little shout there.
So, and Russ's personality, for all the attention it gets, this is why so many people tuned in and either want to see him lose or see him win, see him get humbled. If you here's what it is. In the last little bit, he had a character arc where he turned into more of a villain. I remember bringing notice to this on a podcast. We're on a villain arc now with Russ. And I think this happens naturally when you won too long and you've been winning by 20 kilo spreads for too long. And now people naturally need to see you lose. You just, for years, 2019, he's been in number one ranked 83. People need to see him lose. And then he took a villain arc. You know, with Brendan Petrie, Brendan bombs out. He's going at Brendan when he's at his lowest, talking about, you know, he bombed, blah, blah, blah. And he'll lean into it. He'll lean into the villain arc. Because if you're winning like this, you have to go heel. You can't go baby face for too long. It's easier to be the baby face when you're the underdog. You're the David going against the Goliath. Jurens, it was natural to take the baby face and for the crowd to take his side because he's going against the giant in Russ, the multiple time world champion, number one since 2019, and everything is on social media, the personality, everything. So it was the perfect setup. And when Jurens came out for that last deadlift, I said that 6 kilo clash was the best clash I've ever commentated. That last deadlift by Jurens, probably the craziest, most wound up I've ever seen that crowd at any world championships. It was crazy. And when Jurens hit that deadlift, my God, it was a it was iconic. It was a sports moment. Jurens found himself in the middle of a genuine sports moment nobody's ever going to forget. And I think you could feel, oh my God. And this is, Russ himself said afterwards, this is going to make us bigger. Powerlifting, 83s, it happened. And this is going to be bigger. When I made that post with me doing the Dana White separating the two when they're staring each other down like UFC style, that post, and I'm like, who's going to win the rematch? Blew up. The interactions, the amount of votes, the amount of shares, the amount of comments, that post blew up. People can't wait to see Russ versus Jurens too. And Jurens doing the encore performance, a silent worker, and entering into the 850s. I don't know what to tell you. Now this is literally flip a coin. This is crazy. Jurens is probably the favorite. I mean, he won the last one. At an international level, he's hitting some massive numbers. He's got to be the favorite walking in there. Can you believe? Russ is now the underdog, and the shoe is on the other foot. It's exciting. And Russ now has an opportunity that the world and everyone wanted to see David get slew by Goliath. Now some people, then this happens in all sports. Now people will pile on. He was never that good. See, I told you, if he had come back to the IPF sooner, this would have happened, blah, blah, blah. And now supporters of Russ will start pushing back and make, whoa, you guys are going too far now. Whoa, now it swings both ways, the momentum. It's how sports fans are. and people will start to galvanize behind Russ going into speed. I can't believe the disrespect. You're going to talk about a great like that. This is how it is. This is what always happens in sports. And it'll be even bigger when they clash in Sheffield in Jurin's backyard. Home. And now Jurin's is the David. And Russ has to face him in his backyard, do the travel. He lost. He had to eat his crow, the memes, everything. How many people are going to be like, nah, now I'm back on Russ. First I was on Jurin's, now I'm on. It's going to swing back and forth, back and forth. You need this, by the way, as opposed to just one guy walking up winning by 20 kilos. Russ was right. This is good for the sport. And Russ is also right. Despite how bad it hurt, this is good for him in his story. It's only better. His next move is far more eyeballs on it. Matt, you were in this battle. Walk us through it, young man.
Yeah, and I'm gonna only take up about 2 minutes of your time. This is less about Russ and more about Jurns, more about the winner. And so Russ is clearly an all-time great at 83, came in as a heavy favorite. Did he underperform? Sure. But you know what? Didn't matter. I could tell in the staging area when Jurns was sitting there and we were getting ready to go up for squats, I could tell in his countenance, in his face, in his body language, his demeanor, this is a different animal today, an absolutely different animal. Now, I didn't know that it was going to continue to snowball and that momentum would build in his favor and that he was actually going to get better and better as the meet went on. But I could tell that he just was approaching this and coming in as a different person. He had a towel over his head, very serious, very straight-laced, not much outward displays of emotion in between attempts. One or two quick words to Paul Marsh, then would immediately go over, grab a sip, sit down, towel back over his head, laser focused, just an absolutely surgical, precision-like performance from Jurns Kingamo. And I don't think people understand. I know a lot of the listeners like data. This was a 1.5 kilo PB for him in the squat, a 5 kilo PB for him in the bench. And oh, by the way, he deadlifted 15 kilos more than we have ever seen and was probably good for another 7.5 to 10 on top of that. So anybody who wants to say that, oh, if Russ had made the third squat and it had gotten overturned, none of that would have mattered. Okay, I'm telling you, Jurns was the better man. He was the stronger lifter. He was the better performer on this day, and none of that would have mattered. So he deserves all the accolades, all the praise, all the honor, all the glory. He's now an IPF world champion. Nobody can ever take that away from him. And so when you add up all that data, it adds up to a 21.5 kilo PB total, which is extraordinary. And to do that on the biggest stage, under the strictest judging, under the bright lights, and oh, by the way, against the guy who aggregates more eyeballs on this sport, right? Whether you love him or you hate him, that's just the fact. Brings more attention to the sport than anybody else. Yeah, it was a sports upset. Okay, that was a huge upset to your point, Ryan, because yeah, while the British team coaches and the people behind the scenes might have seen the data that Jurns was producing, we'd never seen that actually manifest itself. We'd never seen the fruits of his labor. We've never seen any of that come to fruition like Eric had spoken about. He's stuck in the 18s, the 820, 3.5, those types of totals. And then for him to package it all up and take 845 is just extraordinary. And so, yeah, that is a huge upset. I know that he switched coaches. So his friend Joey Silva, the 66 kilo lifter from Great Britain, was his previous coach. And I think he brought on Christian Eindhoven, the 93 kilo lifter, as his coach. So that switch, I know that he kept Joey on kind of in a consultant role, but I think Christian is making most of the training decisions now. And so that clearly worked well for him. And we saw just an absolute signature performance. I mean, it couldn't have been any better. And he was sitting there. I remember when Russ walked out for his final deadlift. And for anybody that's kind of second guessing us, I'm just telling you matter of factly, we've got to put on the bar at that point. Okay, because we see that Jurns is on fire and he's closing the gap. We have to put on what we think is 100% make or as close to 100% make as possible for Russ's third deadlift. Because if we miss, Jurns is coming down to 340 kilos, which is going to be even more of a smoke show than the 350 that he pulled. So we have to put a weight on the bar that we know that Russ can make. And when you watch the way that Russ deadlifts, the bar tends to slow right around the knee. That's his sticky point. And so did he have 2.5 more? Maybe, he might have had 2.5 more, but I think that, and I'm not saying this to kind of defend myself. I'm just saying matter of factly, we have to put a weight on the bar that we know that Russ can make and force Jurgens' hand. And we did that. And Jurgens pulled a 15-kilo personal best in the deadlift. And he was standing there right next to me when Russ walked out. Jurgens was in kind of I always let Joey go out for Russ's last deadlift. I'm in the coach's box for all the other attempts because I want to be there. And if I need to go to the jury, it needs to be a national team coach, but I don't want to rob a lifter's personal coach from sharing in that moment. So my habit has been allow the personal coach to go out for the final lift of the day, because if it is a celebratory moment, I don't want to deprive them of that moment. Joey and Russ have that connection, and I wanted them to share that moment together. And so I let Joey go out. So I stood back by the coach's box, or by the chalk bowl, and Jurgens is right next to me. And Jurgens said, "Come on, Russ, smash it." He wanted Russ to make that deadlift. And then he just smiled like a Cheshire cat would, knowing something that we clearly didn't know. I don't think any of us knew that Jurgens was going to be able to pull 350 and pull it with that kind of authority. I mean, that bar jumped off the ground. And as I said, I think he had 357, potentially 360 if he'd have needed it. So hats off to him. Just a phenomenal performance. And everything that you guys said is true. This raises the game, it elevates the game, it aggregates even more eyeballs, it makes it better. It's just, Russ is going to go back into the lab, and like you said, Ryan, he wants to get that taste out of his mouth. And I do agree that Jurgens is the favorite, by the way, because he's on his home turf performing at Sheffield. And so this is just going to be a phenomenal thing for Sheffield and for the powerlifting world. It's going to be a treat for everybody to see. But I just want Jurgens to know, man, you did it. You deserve all the credit in the world. You were the better lifter on the day. You were the stronger lifter on the day. And it would not have mattered what moves we would have made, because you could have countered them with that final deadlift.
Let me tell you a quick story about Jurgens that happened. Do you want to go first, Eric?
I only have one question because you guys were physically there.
Yep.
Obviously, there was a ton of energy in the 1-2 battle. What was the crowd like when Inohara went out for his third deadlift?
That was crazy as well. But
yeah,
I think people knew it was a massive ask. Dude, he broke the ground with 405.
Right.
He broke the ground with, which is crazy. It came out, and I don't mean just like a sliver. You could probably roll a hair underneath. I mean, probably an inch and a half.
Yeah.
Right.
That's insane. 405 kilos. That's a Jesus Oliveira's deadlift. That's not an 83 deadlift. That's over 900 pounds. And he broke the ground and got about an inch off.
Right.
He's got to fix his bench press, his squat, so he doesn't have to deadlift that much. But I would not be shocked. I don't know where his top end deadlift is on any given day. God knows.
But he took the Lapadat strategy this time too, didn't he?
Yeah.
And can I say something?
He didn't.
Yeah.
I know ordinarily people don't like that strategy. I don't think Matt likes that strategy. But listen, if you're going out on your shield each and every time on your last deadlift, say fuck it. He said, I don't have that many big deadlifts in me. I don't.
Yeah.
And I am always going in on the last deadlift. So I said on the podcast, I probably said to him, go in, save yourself, because last year in Malta, his second deadlift zapped him for his third because he just doesn't have the gas in him when he's like he's an outlier, obviously, with the deadlift. Right. In the way that final pull is going to tax his 83 kilo body, it makes sense. So he's like, whatever, I'm going all in. Let me go all in and be as fresh as possible, have as much time as possible, and not be taxed with it. And 405 off the ground. I don't know what his top end deadlift is, but
well, hey,
I want to find out.
It's not every day you get to watch someone try to pull a 5 times bodyweight deadlift. So I'm not opposed to unorthodox strategies. But I was like, hey, look at that. I hope Ryan's happy that he gave the old 6 up 2 attempt strategy.
Is that called the 6 up now? That's called the 6 up.
He walked
That's
up
what people do. They start
throwing
up the 6s. They they look over the coach. They throw up the 6. Load it up, kid. We're not coming out for the second today. I want to say quick story though, real quick about Jurgens when he won. And this is crazy. If you already know the story, don't give a spoiler, but I went back after Jurgens won, and the room is crazy. The room has got it's just multiple people in tears. And I pulled up on Jurgens, and he was seated, knelt over, crying profusely. And I knelt down on one knee, and we did the old collar tie, each collar tie, pull each other in. And my man is right temple to temple with me, and he's crying almost uncontrollably. And he tells me, I heard him. I heard my boy. I could hear him.
Mm-hmm.
I could hear him saying, go, dad, go. And I was like, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. And I'm holding him tight. He's holding me tight, and he's crying right here, right here. And you could, it's emotional, man, for another grown man to be that close, crying, and like you feel it. It was emotional, man. I was emotional there with him too. And it was a moment. And I left. And the next day, I was telling somebody that moment. And that person told me, Ryan, his son isn't here in Lithuania. And I said, what? And that's why he was so shaken and crying uncontrollably. And when I tell you, like a man who saw a ghost, like this was real. This wasn't some corny 3 weeks afterwards, let me fabricate a story because I know it'll go viral. He had no time to make the story up. And the way he was crying, there was not a doubt in my mind this is real. I'm not saying, I mean, he heard what he heard. We all, when you fucking need something, maybe your mind gives you what you need and you get it done. All right. But I promise you, he heard that. I promise you that happened. I promise he went out and exactly what happened to him. And that was his experience. And that was when I found that out, I got chills, man. And it made all the more sense that when I was knelt down beside him in the warm up room and he was crying like that, that's crazy. That's crazy. And when he told the whole crowd to shush, he was trying to hear his son because he couldn't hear him when they went crazy. And the whole crowd, I'd never seen somebody demand a crowd like that. It's now part of powerlifting history, and
Yeah.
it's mythology.
Mythologized.
Thank you, sir. Because of that part with the sun and everything,
Mm-hmm.
we'll all remember. If you were there live, you'll always remember. If you watch the stream, you probably can as well. And then now that you know the story with the sun and everything, it's just I'd never seen anybody command a crowd. It was going to happen. Give Russ his third squat, whatever the shit. This was just going to happen for Jurgens.
Yeah.
It just was going to happen that day. It was too special. There was no stopping that man that day. There's something really special about it. And obviously following up with Silent Worker a week later. So this is no fluke. This is no, as a matter of fact, he pulled a little more at Silent Worker. And yeah, I don't know. It's going to be the craziest in the world to see these guys do it again at Sheffield. I mean, if like Russ was in already automatically, he was the second place finisher with the highest percentage, but they would have been crazy not to give him a wild card. I mean, this is
Yeah.
the views. It's gonna be crazy.
Must see TV.
This is gonna be. How are you gonna miss this? You're not gonna miss this. I don't care. You're new to powerlifting. You left powerlifting a few years. You're gonna hear about. You're coming back. Nobody in powerlifting is gonna miss this, and you don't even got to be into powerlifting to appreciate this story and want to see this clash. This is pride of country, pride of that side of the world versus this. This is everything. It's a rivalry now. It is a sports rivalry like Hack Gibbs, Russ Gibbs, Russ versus Jurgens. This is it. You have to see the second chapter of this story. And then we'll have a tiebreaker if it gets to that at World Games, or if Jurgens wins back to back, you got, well, I mean, I guess they've clashed more times previously in history too, but in recent times, actually, I'm talking. But anyways, phenomenal, fellas.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Get,
Yeah, go ahead,
I,
Matt.
I just want to add one thing. I want to just say hats off to Paul Marsh and the British coaching staff. I mean, you guys called a perfect game. Phenomenal work. You clearly saw stuff in Journs that the rest of us didn't see, and you squeezed plenty of juice out of that that lemon or orange or whatever analogy you want to use. And so I just wanted to commend them on a fantastic performance. And I just wanted to also mention a little bit curious with what happened with Team France there with Giannis Buchu, who ended up bombing in the squat. Clearly, I think the world projected him to finish higher, missed his opening squat, and then decided to go up 7.5 kilos. And those were misses on strength. So I don't know. That was kind of curious to me. And so clearly he wasn't able to finish the meet. The story was obviously about the podium finishers there, but I thought I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that.
And Dominic Tyrell in Group B and off in Group in sixth place. Dominic, when he was
Yeah,
done,
right.
yelled out, "Prime time, session A next time." And
Right.
my man made it in phenomenal showman, man. I mean, he's going to be an amazing addition to Group A. And yeah, I'll let go of that. Just shout out to Paul Marsh did a phenomenal job at this World Championship
Great job. Yep.
and is really building his own resume and his own legacy and did a fantastic job with Journs and 100% believes in Journs. 100% like if the rest of the world was heavy on Russ, and I mean not the entire rest of the world, but Paul never wavered on what he believed that Journs could do. And Paul came into this, if even he probably saw more in Journs than Journs saw himself. If Journs came into this telling himself, I mean, I'm going to try to push, I'm going to try to extend him. Paul Marsh came into this thinking, now I think we got this.
We got him.
I
Yeah.
think we make some right calls. And I think Journs on his podcast was saying, if Russ, I need Russ to miss on squats. If he does that, I'm in the hunt. And exactly that happened. So I'm not saying Journs is like, no, it's impossible to win or anything like that. Obviously, he's a confident young man as well. But he just need. I mean, I don't even think it would have mattered. I already said. But when that happened, it's funny when Journs was recalling it, he still right up to the last deadlift was like, wait, hold on, wait, sorry, I'm sorry, we're pulling for the win. He still wasn't sure they were in position to win it from the deadlifts. He found out in the deadlifts, no, Journs, you're gonna win this. You pull this, you win. He's like, holy, well then we fucking won. Like he did not know until deadlifts rolled around. He was saying, he's like, nah, I just assumed Russ was doing Russ things and we're kind of vying and jockeying around on the podium. But which obviously just makes it him more likable a character as well, right? But anyways, let's move on to the 93s, gentlemen. A freaking battle ensued. Gustav Hedlund missing his third bench press, but other than that, flawless, hitting 895. 895, that special freaking number, huh? 895 again. Emil Krastov, 895, but Gustav, of course, lighter on body weight. 895 is what Petrie hit at Nationals. 895 is what Gavin hit as a big 93 at Nationals. 895 is that special sweet spot of a number. And it's the one that wins Gustav Hedlund the 93 kilo world title. He looked phenomenal. That 355, he probably had more in him. If he wanted to put on 5 more kilos, I would have been comfortable for him hitting that 900. Obviously, he's not going to do that. Do exactly what we need to win. But what a battle it was. Petrie, phenomenal right up until the end when grip started giving out on him. That was new for him. Emil Krastev looked absolutely, if based off of 345, I would have bet the house that 355 was there for him. I so shocked. Usually I could see some indication on the second. The end is near. I had no indication myself. Not live. I watched the second 345 enough, and when I seen 355, and that would take his 895 to 905, I thought that's probably a good decision. Petrie's got a massive pull on him. Gustav's was looking phenomenal. 10 kilos, 905, should put it out of reach, and he's won. And shocked the shit that 355 came out of his hands. But a great battle, and that podium we're going to see all over again at World Games, and who knows what's going to happen with Sheffield. Before we throw it to Matt, Eric, what were your thoughts on the 93s, kind sir? Oh, and also Carlos Peterson Griffith. I don't want to burn up all your material. I don't. Do you know the story, Eric?
Well, it looked like he tore his hamstring on the platform, but also just getting to the
That's right.
platform
I'll
apparently
let you
was
tell it if you want to.
no. It's all this is all me hearing it secondhand. So you go ahead.
Okay, okay. Well, my man, Carlos, God, like what a character this guy is, first off. On the podcast, on the recap podcast when I had the 93s, what a character he was. And I'm so glad he's in the mix. I mean, he adds like I've never met anybody like him before in my life. He's like out of a movie, man. I'm so happy he's here. His emergence on the scene. I remember last year at Worlds, him telling me everybody's going to be talking about me next year. And I hear a lot of that stuff at every World Championships. My man was not fronting. From Sheffield to this World, he showed up. His plane landed the day of the event. And he's not flying within Europe. He's flying from the Western Hemisphere on our side of the world. And he flew and landed that day off the plane onto the bus and drove right to the venue and immediately had to start cutting. And I'm told, I shit you not, made weight with 90 seconds left.
Yeah.
And
At
they said
93.0.
93 on the money with 90 seconds left, made weight. And then from there, immediately started eating, rehydrating, but he doesn't have 2 hours like everybody else. He's got very little time. And to walk out there and hit a world record squat moments later, it's incredible, man. It's freaking, the guy is, you want to talk about being made of stern stuff and talk about like a Rocky, never say die attitude. And Rocky, he said he just kept playing the Rocky theme over and over in his head, whether or not it's in his earphones or just in his head. He was Rocky. He personified that day. And talk about gusto, my man, to break a squat world record and to fly and land. I can't believe he did all that and finish off fifth, 860. Now, his gas ran out by the time deadlifts pulled up. This like the cramping he had for second deadlift, his third deadlift. This is when his body was like, hey, we traveled, we cut weight, we did everything. We didn't recomp properly because you didn't have time. We didn't sleep because you were on a plane. We didn't any of that. Now we're going to start giving out on you. But I can't wait to see what happens when Carlos is at 100%. When everything goes his way, he'll be right up in the mix. But go ahead, Eric. What were your thoughts on 93s?
Oh man, this was a potential another three-person tie total, if you look at what went down, um, I think 895, 887, and 7.5 kilo jump by the lightest of the podium finishers, Brandon Petrie, to deadlift something he's done before, mind you, in prior competition. It would have been a three-way tie with Brandon Petrie taking gold on body weight, which it's just goes to speak to how competitive this class was. So it was riveting to watch, and it could have been the most exciting of all the divisions if it wasn't for some of the other divisions. And even then, it was really cool to see. I told people, watch out for Emil Krastev, look at that side chest, and they didn't listen, you know. And I tell you what, I thought he was going to win based upon basically. I don't want to repeat everything you just said, Ryan. I don't have a whole lot to add, but I think rightly so, like Matt did say in the preview show, like many of the tight battles here, this was a race for 9 out of 9, and you can see that the top three, that was the difference. Who could make more attempts with how close it was. So this is going to be a really exciting division moving forward. And what's crazy is that there were some people who are not on the platform who are going to add to this even more. If you were just to take all the best 93s in the world and put them in 100%, there's a world where there's a 7-way first place tie. If we take everybody out there, which is just bonkers, Carlos Peterson Griffin lands the day prior. Somehow we get 3 different Americans showing up who can all, total right around the same, and don't count out either the Bulgarian or the Terminator himself, who ended up winning, Gustav Hedlund, and we've got just a redonkulous 93 kilo class. So just hats off to everybody in this class. I think it was awesome. And it was a lot of fun to watch. And I think it's pretty wild that we have yet to see that 900 mythical total happen. And it's not far off, and I'm really excited for Sheffield. But I'll leave it at that because I would love to hear from Matt about the pathway that Petrie had to take and navigating everything. But he was a deadlift away.
And I'll say one thing before we give it to Matt. Gustav has to be in contention for a lifter of the year. Winning Sheffield, now winning the Clash of the 93s. I mean, those are two massive. To win Sheffield
Mm.
alone is insane. And then to win the world title in a heavily contested event like this, he's got to be up. He's got to be in that conversation. There's more year left to go. Let's see what happens, but he's got to be in that conversation. And Gustav, it's crazy to say this was his first world title. He's been around forever. He's been
Yep.
in the top forever. And finally, here we are. Well deserved. But sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, I mean, I think you guys nailed it. As I mentioned, I thought that this was a race to 9 attempts. I thought that the way that each gentleman would get to the total would be kind of different. Once again, you've got Gustav, who doesn't have any chips in play, kind of the most well-rounded lifter, if you will, very well balanced in all three disciplines. You've got Emil, who's clearly the outlier there in the bench. I'm sure that he and his coach Kedrick Kwan, did some discussion about potentially, do we play for a chip in the bench? Do we risk it? They decided not to. And he builds the lion's share of his total there, but also because he outperforms the other lifters, everybody except Jonathan Kaiko. But Emil made tremendous progress in his deadlift. I mean, even the 345 that he pulled was a 7.5 kilo PB. So he and Kedrick have clearly, solved some of that riddle, so to speak. And then you've got Petrie, who's, the biggest deadlifter of the group. And so we knew, at least from the American standpoint, look, we're going to try to hold serve the entire way. We want to be 8 for 8 going into the final deadlift. And then we just want to play the game, and we want to size people up and put them in our crosshairs and put the number on the bar that, we wanted to put on the bar. And Brandon executed like a pro. Really proud of him for his first international competition. His squat depth, which at times has been borderline. He sank irrefutably all 3 squats. They were beautiful. That was a PB at the time. I know he went to Silent Worker a week later, added another 2.5 kilos onto that. So hats off to Brandon. But at the time, that was a PB for him. His bench underperformed just a little bit. We took a little bit less on the bench than we thought we might have on the day. And then we just, we emptied the tank on the deadlift there, and it just wasn't enough for the last one, in terms of him being able to hang on to the final attempt there. But, to what Eric's point was before, Brandon has pulled these weights before. His PB in competition is 372 and a half. So this wasn't an out of pocket deadlift for Brandon. Clearly with shorter flight, different circumstances, you factor in the level of the competition, the standards, yada, 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 the travel, all of these things, it makes for that final deadlift attempt a little bit tougher than doing that stateside. And so I know that there's some people who kind of think, oh, well, why didn't you load up that number on your second attempt, and go big on the second attempt and try to pass everybody? And it's like, look, we've got 9 bullets in our gun, and we're going to use every single one of them. And we're not going to swing for the fences on our second attempt. And oh, by the way, if we miss, then we're stuck with our opener. The likelihood of you coming back and being able to make a deadlift that you miss on strength, or you missed on a weird technicality, the likelihood of you coming back and being able to make that on your third attempt is slim. So that was kind of our rationale in terms of what we took on the second attempt. Once again, am I kicking myself and asking myself, oh, should we have gone 2.5 lighter or 5 lighter on the second attempt to leave more gas in the tank for the third? Yeah, maybe. I mean, we can have that discussion. We might make an argument that we should have taken 352 or 355, but again, none of these deadlifts are out of Brandon's wheelhouse. He's an exceptional deadlifter. His opener was absolutely lightning fast. And so for us, that gave us a good diagnostic to say, yep, we're going to go up and go up to 357 on the half on the second one. And then he just wasn't able to hang on for the third. And here's a fun fact. Every single IPF world champion that's a man made their third deadlift. And so the race to 9 attempts, right, was just all 3 of these guys on the podium made 8. It's just the ones that they missed. And so Gustav missed his third bench. And we say before, unless you're, somebody who's a bench specialist and you build a lot of kilos, if there is an attempt to miss, that's the one to miss, is the third bench. And that's the one that Gustav missed. And then he went on to make his third deadlift, whereas Krastev and of course Petrie both missed their third deadlifts. And I don't think that was an out of pocket bad call for Krastev. I mean, I agree with you, Ryan. I think everybody in that entire arena saw his second attempt and said, does he have 10 kilos? Yep, I'll go ahead and place that bet. And I certainly thought that he had it as well. And if he'd have hit that deadlift, I know that it's shoulda, coulda, woulda, and it's all this revisionist history, but he hits that deadlift and now he's at 905.
Mm-hmm.
And respectfully, I don't think that that Brandon had 375 kilos in him, which is what we would have needed. I mean, clearly he didn't, because he didn't have, the number that we took, which was 367.5. So anyway, hats off to Gustav. I mean, that was a really fun session to be a part of. I'm really proud of Brandon, his first international meet. He showed up, showed out, and all you can ever ask for on game day is an opportunity, and he had an opportunity. He had the winning deadlift in his hands. And so, just a thrilling session to be a part of.
Yeah, they're all going to go again too. I mean, 895 is a number that all of them are hitting.
Right.
We got to see them battle again. I don't know who's going to end up at Sheffield. We'll see how those cards end up being dealt. But in Brendan's second deadlift, something's off of the deadlift. You're right. He's done 365. He's done more than 365. He's done more than 365 at a lighter body weight. Like ordinarily, that deadlift should be there for him. This should have been laid out for him. It is what it is. I'm talking to him. He was a little perplexed himself in wondering what exactly is it that why it came out of his hands. But we'll see. They're going to run it back all at World Games, and we'll see if they run it back at Sheffield as well. Let's move along to the 105s, gentlemen. And Ashton Rauska, 365.5 world record squat. Anatoly going out swinging 370.5 for the augmenting the world record. And as I was commentating, I was saying Anatoly's kilos, if he's gonna, I mean, it's funny to say pull off the upset, he's the returning world champ, but Ashton was the favorite. If he's going to pull out the upset and beat Ashton, he needs to find the kilos somewhere. And when the squats came, he found the kilos there and left with 370.5. When the bench press rolled around, though, the writing on the wall started to get a little bit more clear. His bench was good, but you knew if you started adding the kilos, they're going to need a shakeup to happen. It depends how much of a deadlift Anatoly had. If he had a PR deadlift like a squat, well, now we're cooking. But if he didn't, and unfortunately he did not, and ultimately missed his third deadlift, and the third deadlift being loaded was less than his best anyways. His deadlift actually came down, not up. So it was a little bit surprising on that. If his deadlift have gone up in relation to his squat, oh my gosh. So, but it was still exciting. I mean, for a moment, you could still see pathways in which Anatoly might retain his title right up until the deadlift started moving, and then the writing on the wall came, and Ashton crushing his deadlifts. Just an absolutely stellar performance. Only missing his third bench press, which you just said, perfect segue in the last recap there. If you're going to miss one, miss your bench press. He lost 5 kilos, which in the grand scheme of things isn't much. These fellas, Ashton leaving with 940.5, Anatoly leaving with 940.5, Emil Norling 905, and he has done as much as 928.5. I'm not sure what's going on with Emil. We talked about this in the preview show. Hopefully he can gather himself, because he's world class. He still is world class, but he's got more historically than he's showing. He's still a young man too. I would expect him to be in the 930s by now and be entering the conversation where if someone like Anatoly starts fumbling, he'll pick up the ball and run it into the end zone. Walter from Canada with 887.5 when we go on from there, Money Mo. But actually, that's not Money Mo. That's Libya's Muhammad. But fellas, Eric, talk to me about the 105s.
Yeah, I think let's start with actually Walter, because this is like you said, the conversation in an ideal world, I'm sure this is what Emil would like, would be, oh, hey, if the number one, number two are slipping, you could catch them. But actually, what we're seeing here is that he almost got caught slipping and lost his ticket to World Games. And I want to give a huge shout out to Walter Carriazos. We actually had him on Iron Culture because his story is very interesting. I won't spoil the plot there, but you're probably looking if someone is looking at the results, they're thinking, oh, he had to put on 385 to to pull onto the podium. That's ridiculous. That's way too heavy. No one could have pulled that. Walter has done 376, and he actually attempted a 386 in Canada just back in February. And this is not an unreasonable pull, and he's incredibly strong. And this is someone who's been improving consistently, coming up from the 93s all the way to the 105s, and he actually placed fourth all the way back in Calgary in the 93s.
Yeah.
So Walter's no joke. He's still improving, and it's awesome to see because this is a guy who has a hard full-time job plus another job in his mid-30s, and I think we just need to keep our eye on Walter because he's a coming. And there's a scenario where he keeps improving his squat and his bench, and he only needs to pull only in the 370s to get onto that podium and start threatening some of these guys. So I think we're going to see one of Canada's own coming forward, which I know you love, Ryan. But anyway, that I think was a really interesting storyline. I didn't see him coming so strongly, and that Emil was not at his best, but it was sufficient, but probably a little closer than I think people anticipated for him actually holding on to third. And then, yeah, I think we need to give a shout out to Anatoly because, yeah, he didn't have the deadlift there, but he currently has the world record, even though he didn't win. It's a similar scenario to what happened with Jess Bittner and Agata a few years back, where the person who gets the total first gets to keep the world record, even if the person after it matches it and wins on body weight, which is what we saw. So it was really, really exciting in this battle, just up until the last minute where it was clear, like you said, Ryan, that Anatoly's deadlifts just were not going to be there on the day to threaten Ashton as much as needed. And Ashton, I wouldn't say he cruised into winning by any means. He had to be on his P's and Q's. He had to do really well, but it was good to see him get pushed. And it was good to see Anatoly, maybe not at his best on all three lifts, but technically heaviest total he's ever put up by 0.5 kilos, new world record, and definitely showed up and had a good class between the top two.
Yeah, I do. Anatoly's not done. Put it that way.
No.
If he adds more key, if his deadlift comes up and rises like his squat does, although unfortunately, when you have a monster squat, it'll impact your deadlift. Sometimes you don't have both. Sometimes you take 5 kilos off the squat, you'll have 10 more on your deadlift. It's a balancing act. He went all in on his squat, and then his deadlift suffered. It is what it is. Still had a great show. You're right. Right up until the deadlifts, we weren't sure. And just give us that. Give us suspense. Let us be thinking, oh my God, he's at a whole new level. And he was. And then when the deadlifts rolled out, all right, it became more and more clear Ashton's going to take this. We'd also be remiss if we didn't mention Sanchez Dillon with a 400 kilo deadlift. Absolutely monstrous.
Yes.
After his second attempt, he made the gesture with a 4 after 382.5. We're going to load up 4. This is the same guy who loaded up 411 at Arnold UK and went for Jesus Oliveira's deadlift, the biggest deadlift in the IPF. And so he smokes 400 kilos as a 105.
Yeah.
11 kilos more. It could be on the table. It could be on the table. Also, another note before I toss it to Matt. Ashton on the podcast revealed for Sheffield. Now, for this competition, he weighed in at 102.9. For Sheffield, it's on 100%. He might go 93.
Mm-hmm.
You like the 93s, fellas? Hey, Eric, you thought the 93s were stacked, huh? My
Excuse
friend?
me. Eight person deep now.
It's ridiculous. It is insane. If Ashton comes down, holy smokes. Can you imagine the super battle it would be with Gustav versus Ashton versus whatever else 93 show up? Amazing. Sheffield, and then you add Russ versus Jurins, and I mean Sheffield in the 66s. Sheffield is just, you can't miss it. You can't freaking miss it. But Matt, what happened, sir?
Phenomenal day for Ashton. I think I don't have a whole lot to add, or a whole lot of color or flavor beyond what you said. I'm just ecstatic for Ashton. You know, he's a veteran of the game. He's been competing since 2013. This is his second, I believe, time lifting in the IPF. Not that he's a stranger to international competition, because as we all know, he'd been over to Korea and tangled with Keenan Lee before. But for him to be able to go overseas and check this box, this was a box that Ashton deserved to check, and that I believe not necessarily needed to check from the standpoint of padding his resume, because I think he's already decorated and proven that at 105, you know, maybe save for Bob Matthews, but the two of them are the strongest people in the room when it comes to that body weight. And we're going to get to Bob in just a moment. But he needed to check this, and now he's checked the box, and he's an IPF Open Classic World Champion, and I'm just ecstatic for him. There's nobody else on the team that I wanted to win more than Ashton. I mean, he serves in our national armed forces, and he turned down a slot that was offered to him in 2017 when Susie was the head coach, and you know, because of military obligation. And so the doors swung open for him this time, and he went out and just executed like a pro. And it was fun to see that squat battle unfold. Anatoly and he kind of ping-ponging the world record back and forth. I know that was exciting for the fans and the spectators. I think Ashton had more in the tank, but we didn't want to empty the tank on the squat. We knew that we had more in the deadlift. And as you said, Ryan, if there's an attempt to miss, it's the third bench. We were kind of wondering there for a moment if Anatoly was going to take a shot at the world record in the bench. You know, Anatoly's PB is 232.5. I believe the world record is 233. But Anatoly decided to play it safe and kind of pad his total and, you know, go for 230. And then, as you said, Ryan, just things kind of swung open there for us in the deadlift. And even if Anatoly had made that third deadlift attempt at 347, we would have then needed 375, which was definitely in Ashton's wheelhouse. I mean, anybody who saw Ashton's last deadlift at 365 can honestly say that he probably had 380 kilos if we'd have needed it. You know, he absolutely destroyed the third attempt. I like the attitude that Ashton showed in terms of him coming out and compartmentalizing every single attempt. I told him not to get ahead of himself, just stay in the moment, and he did that. And if you saw him come out for his last attempt, you'd have thought that that was for like a PB or a world record. I mean, he was fired up, you know, and I told him, I said, you've got to put your foot on the gas on this one, take it seriously, you know, make a statement. And that he did, and was able to secure the W. And I'm just ecstatic for him. And just, I mean, so now, you know, Sheffield and World Games is just going to be all the more exciting with Ashton Ruska in it.
If Anatoly's deadlift was there,
Yeah,
it hit 350 to 355,
yeah,
and he can, historically
Yeah.
speaking, that's reasonable. Then Ashton would have had to hit on his top end as well.
yeah,
And at the very least,
right,
it would have forced Ashton to load up what is, historically speaking, Ashton's top end.
right.
His moves, his deadlifts were moving that day. But
Yep.
as a viewer and as a commentator that's building the suspense, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that pathway. I'm telling myself, please, Anatoly, have your deadlift there. So you load 350 to 355. Now Ashton's got to load 380s. And okay, oh my God, now Ashton's at his top end. He's at the very top he's ever had to do. And now he's got to do it at Worlds. Let's see what happens. And then it's suspenseful. That's what the viewers, that was what would have made it like, oh my God. And we were almost there.
Yeah,
But once we saw the dead wasn't there for him, it was like, well, I mean, if you're going to make Ash load 3-6, I mean, he's going to hit this 10 out of 10 times. You know,
Right.
like it became, all right, well, we're not going to have that. That's fine. Can't have it all. Let's move into the 120s, fellas. And Bob Matthews said, don't get clapped by a 105. My God, man. Bob Matthews weighing in at 105.9. Talk about a David and Goliath matchup, winning with 970. Second place, ETN from Lebanon. And while he went 3 for 3 for squat, almost bombed out on bench press, missing his first, missing his second, narrowly hitting his third. And I mean, with bated breath, we all waited to see if this one was going to pass. He's back in the hunt, hits his opening deadlift, misses 396, and it looks like he's in all types of trouble, and hits 396, a world record in the 120s on this third pull in dramatic fashion. Etienne giving us a show and finishing with 958.5. This young man, born in 2000, the junior world champion last year, he's got a future, fellas. He's got a future. Now, Bob weighing in at 105, surprise, surprise, is probably going to go 105 for Sheffield, and he'll have a massive advantage as a 105 at Sheffield. And now looks like he might be the favorite. Let's see what their training looks like and how things progress. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the first Sheffield, Taylor Atwood was a massive favorite, shows up injured. Things happen from here till then, I understand. But at this point right here, right now, I think a lot of people raise their hand and say Bob is now the favorite due to what we've seen. Tony Cliff finishing his day, with 937.5. It went a little down. I think he'd alluded to it. He's a little roughed up. By the way, Tony Cliff not only sent me that bullshit detector alarm. Why did I give this guy my address? The guy sent me a Don King mask because I'm always stirring the pot, starting shit.
That's hilarious. Love him.
I'm moving and I'm not giving him my new address. All right. That's it, Tony. That was the last one. Send whatever you need, but it better be express, Playboy, because I'm out of here in like a month. So it better be quick, whatever else you're trolling me, sending me. But anyways, Nico, sorry, with 907 from the strength guys finishing off podium. But those fellas, Bob, Etienne, Tony, man, Tony, 40 years old. He's gonna be at World Games now next year. Just keeping it moving. And just refusing to go silently into that night, go quietly into that night. But Matt, tell us about this. Or actually, Eric, maybe I'll throw it to Eric. We're kind of running out of time with Eric. I'll get your thoughts, Eric.
Yep.
No, not a whole lot to add. I was it was interesting to see where like Tony was basically pretty locked in for third, so he got to throw a bit of a Hail Mary on his last deadlift. Only bit of color commentary I have to add there. I think his total, if he pulled that third deadlift down a little bit to something that I think would, no offense, a little more realistic on the day, we could have seen him in the 950 range. Which, but it's awesome. I can't wait to see Tony compete at World Games. He was clearly in third place there. And then I was really surprised, like even though, Etienne is young and he's junior world champion, he's improving rapidly, opening at 217. I mean, I'm not aware of obviously the local meets in his area or his training, but that was his previous meet PR, which he opened on. So I think, that had me as a bit of a head scratcher, as just a coach. I was like, man, you nearly bombed out on bench, and unsurprisingly, you opened on your best bench you ever done in competition. So generally not advised, but it was really good to see the 396 deadlift. That was incredible, and I think the future of the 120s is really kind of open. If Bob decides to go to the 105s. And we could see Etienne being kind of the new dominant champion in the 120s for a while. So the future is interesting. And Bob just putting on a masterclass. And I love that there was a little bit of shit talking between Kel and Bob, where Kel said, "Listen, it's not going to be enough, homie. Like you're not going to get best lifter." That kind of goes back to my commentary earlier about just putting some respect on Kel's name, because while Austin is almost a one in a generation kind of talent, Kel is really, really, really good, and so is Bob. So it's just it was cool to see. And yeah, I've got nothing really additionally to add there, but I'm just excited to see where everyone ends up going in the future of the 120s, because I think it's been a little, I don't want to say stagnant, I think that's disrespectful, but it hasn't been as exciting as it has been in prior years, and I think we're going to see some interesting things happen in this class moving forward.
I'll add one note. Sorry. Unplugged my.
Uh-oh. Can't hear Ryan.
Okay. Sorry, fellas. All right. I'll add one note. Rondell Hunt is coming back. Keep that in
That's
mind.
true.
You said he
Yes.
might be the champ of the future. He might. He might. Look, a lot of things can happen, and he's young, and who knows 5 years from now. But
No, I
Rondell's
totally
coming.
neglected that. I need to give Rondell his
I got
props.
you.
Yeah,
Don't
no,
worry,
no.
I got you. I
Thank you.
wasn't gonna let us leave the podcast because you freaking know Rondell would be like, "Excusez-moi,
Mhm.
allow me to." I got you, fam. Um, and what else was I gonna say? And then I thought I had another note there, but yeah. Anyways, and obviously with Bob moving down, it's gonna be a phenomenal show. Bob had an avenue to just show up and show out because he knows at Sheffield he's going to go to 105. So it'll be interesting to see what all happens there. Matt, how did this battle take place with you handling Bob?
In terms of Bob's body weight, I think that's a big topic of discussion. I asked him, I think when he left New York, he was 108 kilos. And after he landed, somehow he magically lost some kilos in the air. Typically, I think Eric can comment on this more than I ever could, being the nutrition guru. But I think sometimes you're bloated and sometimes you'll actually land and be a little heavier. But as Bob told it, he was a stitch lighter. And he continued to lose weight throughout the week or throughout the days leading up to the competition, hence the light body weight at 105.9, drinking some Gatorade before he stepped on the scale to make sure that he quote unquote made weight into the class, if you will. It's kind of funny just saying that. But an exquisite performance from Bob Matthews, just a 9-for-9 day at an extraordinarily light body weight. I know that he underperformed in his mind's eye in terms of what we were projecting. His top end, his training was extraordinary, and I was privy to all of that. And he hit some just amazing numbers in prep. And yeah, we were projecting much bigger numbers. And if all the stars would have aligned and we'd have swung for all the 3A attempts, then maybe, just maybe, we're talking about 1,000 kilo total. But I think even, when he was on various podcasts, he'd even said, look, if that happens organically, it kind of happens. And that's the approach we were taking. We weren't chasing a metric or chasing a number. We were aggressively pursuing victory and a successful performance. And that's exactly what he did. And so while he lifted less in the disciplines, so to speak, and I say only in air quotes, totaled 970 kilos. He did everything that was asked of him. He executed like a pro. We took what was there, save for the last deadlift. I think there was plenty left in the tank for the last pull if we'd have needed it. And he walks away IPF world champion. And yeah, hats off to Tony Cliff. Just making it interesting there at the end and kind of loading up. Tony, the significance of Tony's last deadlift was he called for 372.5, and that would have put him 2.5 kilos ahead of where Bob was, also with the understanding that Bob has the final pull. And so we didn't have lot number advantage over Tony. So we weren't able to then drop our deadlift. So we were going to pull 375, but then looking at Etienne, we're kind of like, man, if we stay at 375, and we take that, Etienne only needs 403. And so knowing that he had pulled the 402.5 in training, we weren't comfortable with that. So that's why we went up to 380 on Bob's final deadlift and took that number. That's the significance of that number. We wanted to kind of taking the same approach and same rationale that we took with Austin. We wanted to put the final nail in that coffin emphatically with a number that we were very confident that Bob would hit. And of course, he executed like a pro and had plenty of room to spare in that final deadlift. But that's kind of the calculus that took place. So, yeah, I mean, that was just a fun session. I was really disappointed as somebody who's friendly with Indy from Great Britain. Not disappointed in him, but sad for him that he wasn't able to have the performance that I think he was expecting. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he incurred some type of injury late into prep. But if you look at Indy's history over the last year, my God, he's competed at Euros twice, I think it was, and then had to do the British selections. And so we're asking a guy to do 3-4 huge meets, prep after prep after prep, and I think it finally, the mileage on the tire, so to speak, reared its head in that fashion to where he wasn't able to perform to the standard that he was expecting and kind of be relevant there at the end for podium placing. But yeah, I mean, this was the Bob Matthews show. This was the story that was his, and it was just exciting to see. And I'm looking forward to seeing him, perform at Sheffield, and then of course, going to World Games as well.
We
Thanks for that, Matt. I didn't realize the significance of 372 on Tony Cliff's poll and where
Yeah,
that was strategically. So apologies
right.
to Tony.
No,
That was
no
something I
worries.
missed in the replay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
We got 5 minutes with Eric. I'm gonna toss it to Eric to get his thoughts on Jesus in the 120s. Then we're gonna let him go. I do want to give a quick shout out before we move from the 120s. Lucas Wiseman of Canada, Group B, ended off in top 5, and will
Yeah.
probably be in Group A next year. And it's always nice when you see that. But Eric, what are your thoughts on the 120 pluses? Timur surprised everybody, made it relatively close. We said probably 1100 is going to be for kilos, is going to be in his range for 2024, but not at these world championships. As it turns out, we were right. It wasn't at these world championships, but 1087.5. And with Jesus, a little vulnerable on the day with 1112.5. However, if we're honest, Jesus probably had more in his deadlifts and it was a little further than the numbers showed. He just did what he had to on the day. However, it was entertaining enough. And Timur taking world records along the way that were all Jesus's junior world records along the way, giving an indication of his pacing as a junior, his pacing as a lifter, his maturation as an athlete. You could foresee before this year's out, could he add another 12 kilos? Of course. But of course, he could add 12 kilos on one of the lifts. He could be 1,100 kilo lifter in 2024 as a junior. Next year, where's he going to be? Well, I don't know if he's going to be neck and neck with Jesus, but it might be where 1112.5 isn't going to be good enough, and you can't have your foot just on and off the gas cruising to win. He's going to force Jesus's hand. What's your thoughts, Eric?
Well, first, I want to talk about one other very important battle that occurred related to the 2024 Worlds, and that is the King of the Lifts Fantasy League. One of the reasons that allegedly Rory is not with us is because he, quote unquote, couldn't make the schedule work. But I think the real issue is that he had a total of 97 points, placing him in the rankings. And some would say, Eric, you're missing out on a lot of ties. This is really making Rory look worse than he is. But he was ranked 220 out of 304 people who participated in that fantasy league, while myself and Matt Gary, we had a few more points than that. We had 111 points. And again, technically we tied, but I would note that I'm ranked at 73 while Matt Gary's ranked at 74. So I just want to graciously accept the title of the highest placing, tying, and I think I won on body weight, Matt, the King of the Lifts fantasy league title, and that Rory was so embarrassed that he wouldn't even come back for the recap show. So with that important recap out of the way, I will say, watching the 120 pluses, I was really excited, not necessarily because it was so tight between Timur and Jesus, but for the future. Because like you said, Ryan, Timur is young, he's on the rise, and we have not had a 120 plus battle for a long time. We've had these hypotheticals, and we've had a few in the past, but we haven't been in a position where the sport is developed enough where we could have two individuals who are, could simply make the 120 plus class, and then be at the level where we don't know who is going to be the runaway favorite. Ray had some people who were always chipping at his heels, and a Kelly Branton, and others like the big squatter whose name is escaping me right now.
Jezza,
From now,
Blaine Sumner had a battle with him back in the day too.
yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
Jezza Wepa, Jezza Wepa. Thank you. He gave him some frights, but I think a 1087 kilo total, being behind Jesus's total by a good bit. It looks like a lot, but we're talking about one attempt, or even less than one attempt when we're talking about big boys like this. So it was tight. And yeah, he's not at 1100 yet, but hell, if he does another meet in say November, I wouldn't be surprised if he could get that. So really exciting stuff. And it was far more riveting. And I think he put Jesus in a position where Jesus had to be on his P's and Q's, similar to a few other divisions. No one in the 2024 IPF world really got to just coast to victory. They at least needed to take, like even Austin, like Matt Gary gave us that insight. He said, listen, we need to put the nail in the coffin. We're not going to be in a position where that could occur. So I think similar to Jesus here, maybe even a little closer. This was exciting, and I think we anticipated that Timur was going to be on the rise, but I don't think we thought it'd be as close as it was. which was made this an exciting class. But I think primarily the storyline is, wow, we're going to see some incredible clashes in the not too distant future.
Walk us through it, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric just nailed it. I mean, he spoke very highly of Timor, and this, you know, clearly on paper, when you look at the totals, this was a 2-horse race. Hats off to Jesus. He was coming in with a bit of an injury, a bit of a hamstring injury, and that kind of went into our calculus in terms of whether we're going to take 3 attempts versus 2 attempts. And actually, because the hamstring was healed, we thought, you know, we could go ahead and take 2 attempts. I know that sounds maybe a bit irrational in terms of, you know, being risky, if you will, but we knew that he was going to be in a small flight. We knew that he's, matter of factly, the strongest man in the room, and so we were willing to do that. He has a history of doing that. There's data points behind it, and so we took the 2 squats there. And yeah, to Eric's point, I mean, their totals were separated by 25 kilos. So when you look at the score and you analyze the attempts, this was the fact that Jesus out squatted Timor by 25 kilos, and that was the difference in the meet. Timor's bench has been on the come up, and now we can attribute that increase in bench to actually getting better and actually getting stronger. In the past couple of meets, it was when you do a deeper dive into Timor's ascension there in the bench press, it could be attributed partially to body weight because he put on 4 kilos of body weight in his last 3 or 4 meets, but this time his body weight was essentially the same, and yet his bench went up 7.5 kilos. And so he was only 12.5 kilos away from that 1,100 kilo total. But again, the story of the day, and let's give him his flowers, is Jesus Olivares, making 8 out of 8 attempts. It's harder. I'm just telling you, it is. It's harder for these big guys to travel that far and to compete. And they're different animals and different beasts. And they don't move the same way. They don't train the same way. They don't eat the same way, sleep the same way, fit into tight spaces the same way as the rest of us walking around do. And so for Jesus to go over there and execute and have just a phenomenal performance and lift so well, to make all 8 of his attempts with room to spare in each one, right? It's not like we were redlining the engine. And yes, we had that cushion to play with. And he played with it well, and he executed like a pro, and he's now a 4-time IPF world champion. And we were able to not redline the engine, which is good for a big guy like that, because now he has a lot of time to kind of lick his wounds, so to speak, and sit back and recuperate and restore and get ready for Sheffield.
And Eric signing off, but it's Sheffield. I'm excited to see what he does in Sheffield. Obviously, he's got the untested record in his sights, as well as there's discussion. Now he's got to make the decision. Is he going to do World Games and the World Championships back to back? Especially with the emergence of Timor, he won't be able to cruise to a World Championship win. And that's when a guy like Timor can keep a guy like Jesus honest. I mean, Jesus is the strongest powerlifter that ever lived. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I mean, I got nothing but respect for the guy, but he needs some good, steady, healthy competition. After a while, you're going to need that, and Timor's going to offer that, and it's going to make things exciting. So we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes up. Also want to say Stanley Oden of France taking that bronze medal. Stanley, he's full well capable. I wouldn't be surprised to see 1,000 kilo total out of him in the future. He'll be at World Games clinching, because he clinched that bronze medal and he ended up on the podium. And of course, America, number 1 in terms of the nations, Great Britain 2, France 3, Sweden 4, and Canada coming in 5th. And Austin Perkins, number 1 for best lifter, Chell, and then Bob Matthews coming in 3rd. And Matt, it's been a slice, my friend. Any other caveats you think we should add?
The only thing that I was going to add, just two things to add. First of all, I think that Jesus needed a performance like this in terms of it being clean. So he lifted pristine. Everything was to a flawless standard. I don't even recall Jesus even getting a single red light, to be honest with you. I'd have to go back and look at the live stream, but I don't think that he did. So I think that it was good for him to go out and execute so surgically and lift so well, even though clearly beyond his or below his limits, which is fine because this was the performance that was necessary and this is the performance that we took. And he didn't have to rev the engine. So that about Jesus. And then in terms of looking forward to World Games, I'll just say this. For those of you who are listening who don't know how World Games are scored, World Games are scored on GL points. And so they are going to couple up the weight classes. So they do the same thing for the women as they do for the men. So starting at the bottom for the men, since that's who we're talking about, where they're going to couple up the 59s and the 66s. Then they're going to couple up the 74s with the 83s, the 93s with the 105s, and the 120s with the 120 pluses. And so in those four couplings, if you will, the lighter weight class guys, or the guys in the lighter weight classes, so we're talking about your Waskar Carpios, your Austin Perkins, your Gustav Hedlund, your let me see, and then your 120, your Bob Matthews, the lighter people, they don't have to quote unquote make weight. They can come in at any body weight that they want and lift. And while they can't secure any world records in the weight class that they normally compete in, this isn't about world records. This isn't Sheffield. This is World Games where it's on GL points. And so for you to not have to make weight, particularly flying all the way to China, that's a long journey for a lot of people. That's a nice variable that you don't have to consider as much. And you can train at a heavier body weight, which is conducive to recovery and conducive to joint health and all those things that we talk about, and we talk about mass moving mass, and go into World Games being a stitch heavier, not having to worry about making weight and putting up a really huge total, and being lighter than the people who do have to make weight, right? Who are lifting in the class above you. And so Ryan, you've been talking about these different matchups, and so we've got Waskar, who's now, I've already spoken to him. He's not going to make weight. I know Austin's not going to make weight at 74. So we're going to get some of these battles that you've been screaming for and crying for. And granted, it's not necessarily kilo for kilo. It's going to be on GL points. It's a little bit different, but it just makes for an exciting World Games to come.
We'll still have a head-to-head, though. Let's not kid ourselves. I understand they're going to rank it on GL points, but when Russ and Perk and Jurin's clash,
that's close.
They're clashing straight up kilo for kilo.
Yeah,
those guys are, Jurin's and Russ don't want to get out totaled by Perk. They don't give a shit. Okay, great. He's going to beat us on GL points. They don't want to get out totaled. We're going to have some good old fashioned Donnybrook breaking out. Let's see what happens.
And same thing on the women's side too. I mean, there's going to be some good matchup. Yeah, it's not just the men. But it's just to say that the lighter weight classes in those couplings have a distinct advantage from the standpoint of that huge variable of body weight is not a box that they necessarily have to check, unless of course they want to. So
let's see how it shakes up. Listen, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Thank you as always. Much appreciated. And of course, everybody listening, please do subscribe. Give us high ratings as usual. And until next time, Six Pack Lapadat. 6 up. And we are out.